The prince sweated from the heat of the javelin that was right next to him. He had no essence in him at all, so he couldn't even do anything. A look of frustration appeared on his face for a moment before he let it aside. He sighed. "I guess it's my loss then," he said. The javelin disappeared from the princess's hand as she stopped using her essence entirely. She breathed in relief as she no longer had to fight anymore. The fight had gone on for far too long. She slumped a little, using her brother as a support, and got down to the floor, and she started breathing heavily along with him. The referees all looked in silence as if they didn't know what to do. The host arrived right on time and walked up to the royals to check on them before anything. After seeing that neither was hurt as badly as they could have, a massive grin appeared on his face as he turned around toward the audience and announced the result. "Princess Elena of Blackhawk Academy has won. She is the winner of our competition," he shouted. Following his shout, the crowd erupted. What was noise, what was cheer, it became impossible to tell. The prince closed his eyes and let the sound all drown out. After a few moments, he opened his eyes and looked toward his sister. "Congratulations, you did it." Elena sighed and looked toward her brother. "You did not bad yourself," she said. "You had nearly won. I feel like I had to cheat to win against you." "You did?" He asked for a second before remembering something. "Oh right. You ran out of essence. How did you manage to use it again?" "I just borrowed a little from my other core," she said with a foolish little grin on her face. "Borrowed? What?" The prince was a little confused. "You used moonlight essence to use magma skills?" "No, I used moonlight essence to turn it to magma essence to add a bit of essence to my magma core for the final attack," she said. "Wah! You can do that?" he asked. "How does one essence turn to another one?" "Moonlight essence is the closest thing to pure essence. It has little trouble being absorbed by other cores," she said. "It takes some time, which was why I had to run around without using either essence. I could have used moonlight essence, but I knew I couldn't win against you that way." "This method, however, paid off beautifully," she said. Alan remained stunned for a few moments before he finally said, "That's cheating." Elena chuckled a bit and got back up. Her moonlight essence core replaced her empty magma essence core, and she could feel her fatigue lessen a little, even though it wasn't completely gone. The crowds were still cheering, so she helped her brother get up as well and started waving at the crowd finally. The host praised both of them, but the princess was given most of the praise. The members of the Blackhawk Academy were led into the stage, so they all came rushing in to celebrate the victory with the two of them. Shayna and Hyandus immediately arrived next to the prince and princess to protect them from the group of people that would want to hug them. They were doing their duty as a guard. However, the prince tapped their shoulders and sent them away, letting the people all come to them with praises. He hugged whoever wanted to hug him, and shook hands with whoever wanted to shake hands. He drifted more towards girls than boys, and the princess had to pull him away at the end. Ning got caught up in the cheers as well, and people started praising him for getting third in the finals. After a bit of cheering, everyone was sent back to the stands as the final tally of the competition was made. While the people already knew which academy had won the overall competition, the final numbers were yet to be displayed. Once the tally was completed, the numbers were revealed. Essence Heart Academy came last with 1452 points. As they had been disqualified from the final competition, they could not get any points at all. Crimson Wings Academy came ninth with 1614 points. Most of their students had been disqualified early, so they couldn't get many points. Frolane Academy came eighth with 1761 points. As an academy that carried the Empire's name, this was not the sort of result they wanted to have. Light Dance Academy came seventh with 1933 points. As the host of the competition, people hoped they would do much better, but the competition was simply too stiff for them. Ashwind Academy came sixth with 2,119 points. It was the first academy to cross the 2,000 points threshold in the list. Grandwool Academy came fifth with 2,185 points. It was barely higher than the Ashwind Academy but had managed to land itself in the fifth place. Dream Dust Academy came fourth with 2,269 points. They had done rather incredibly in the competition and had managed to gain quite some points. However, still, they hadn't managed to reach the final three on the list. Blue Spark Academy came third with 2,447 points. For an academy that had won the competition last year, they had barely managed to secure the top three. If it was not for Essence Heart Academy's disqualification, this would not have been possible at all. With 2,794 points, a huge jump from the third place, Peace World Academy had secured the second spot. Thanks to its student reaching the top 4, it had managed to gain a significant amount of points, without which it wouldn't have reached here at all. Finally, as everyone already knew, Blackhawk Academy won the entire tournament, and the number of points they had gathered to do so had left every single other academy in the dust. Even with just 8 students taking part in a competition that allowed for 20, they had managed to acquire an amazing 3,645 points, becoming one of the higher points earners in the history of the tournament. With the academy ranked, the audience started leaving the arena. There was no award ceremony or anything. The exposure these academies got was award enough. They were already popular and now they became even more so popular, with every kid that wanted to join on knowing that Blackhawk Academy stood tall and strong amongst all. The headmaster's face was filled with a grin from ear to ear as he couldn't keep it hidden at all. A few of the teachers teared up, especially knowing the pain it had been for them to come all the way here. It wasn't every day that 80% of your participants were poisoned and you still came out on top. The students all happily celebrated in their seats, but none walked away. Seeing everyone walking away, they were a little confused as they should have been leaving too. After all the other schools were leaving. Even the audience and academies leaving looked back at them, some wondering why they hadn't left yet. Most assumed they were still celebrating, while others simply didn't care. Few that tried to stay behind were quickly sent away by the many staff members of the arena. And yet, the Blackhawk Academy still remained. A few nobles came by to visit them, singing praises of the matches they had seen, congratulating not just the 2 twins, but also Ning, who had shown them something incredible. They thanked them all back and watched them leave. The rulers of the Red Raven region, Blue Sparrow region, and Green Dove region also came to congratulate them. Even Sabern came to congratulate, despite not being the true ruler of the White Owl region. Caleb was asked to be taken away by the Green Dove region ruler, promising to bring him back the next day. The Red Raven head, Yorsha's mother, was incredibly proud of her daughter as well and wanted to take her with her to celebrate. However, the headmaster had to refuse. When asked, he simply notified them that it was His Majesty's request that they all remain behind. Finally, the students understood the reason why the headmaster had forced them to remain behind. They immediately started getting excited learning that the Emperor of the Dominion itself was coming to meet them. The rulers had no choice but to accept what was told to them. After all, how could they refuse the Emperor? Someone looked to the side and saw the Emperor walking toward them. The moment they notified the others, they all turned around in anticipation of the Emperor that they would meet for the first time today. Ning looked toward the Emperor and saw the white-haired old fellow. Next to him, he saw his son, the middle-aged man that had saved his opponent in the other arena, the Crown Prince. The Emperor arrived next to the rulers and looked at them. "Have you not finished saying your congratulations yet?" he asked. "We have," Yorsha's mother spoke. "I was simply trying to take away my daughter, but I hear you wanted to talk to them, so I decided to wait." The Emperor looked at the young red-haired lady and nodded to himself. "You can take her away if you want. I have no requirement of most of them staying here." "Thank you, Your Majesty," the ruler said and called her daughter before walking away. Caleb left as well, walking away with the head of the Haas family. The Blue Sparrow region's ruler walked away after bowing to the Emperor, while Sabern did not want to leave just so early. He wanted to see if he could find a moment to take the sword that Ning had with him. He acted as if he left, but instead, he planned on waiting to the side. By the time the Emperor was alone and stood before the students of Blackhawk Academy, the sun had already hidden past the arena, filling the arena with darkness. Bright lights were still high in the air, however, giving enough light for everyone to see. "As an academy that bears the name of my family, I applaud you for the achievements you have gained today. It is no small feat to become first in the inter-school tournament, even less to do so by such a large margin. As such, I would like to congratulate you all for your performance in the competition," the Emperor said. The students felt proud, the headmaster even more so, but even then he knew it wasn't him that had achieved it. "I'm afraid while the others helped a lot, it was these 3 that did the most work. Had it not been for them, we wouldn't have won by such a large margin," the headmaster said, looking toward the twins and Ning. "Yes, I know," the Emperor said. "Leave me with these 3. The rest of you may leave and go back to your lodge." The headmaster quickly thanked the emperor and took the students and teachers away, leaving only Ning and the twins alone with the emperor and crown prince. There were other people there, he could tell, but they were all the emperor's bodyguards certainly. With that in mind, they were gone from the new arena in a matter of minutes. The emperor looked at his grandchildren and hugged them both at the same time. I always knew you would do me proud, he said. You especially, Elena. You beat your brother, even though he trains more than you ever do. That is no easy task. Thank you, grandfather, the girl said with a small happy smile. Don't think I think any less of you for losing, the emperor told Alan. You lost against someone with 2 cores. Had it been a regular fight, you would have won that match. Yes, grandfather, the prince said. All right, you two leave as well, he said. I have business with your friend here for now. With Ning? The prince asked. Yes, the emperor answered. Damien, take them away and send them back to their academy. I will remain here with this young friend. The crown prince looked at his father with a bit of a hesitating look, but he quickly nodded. Yes, father, he said. Come on, you two, he spoke. Let's go. Uncle, did you watch our battle? Alan asked. It was amazing, right? Yes, it was great. Your sister was better than you, the crown prince said. No, she was not, the prince said. She cheated, she said it herself. I won, the princess said simply. The uncle, niece, and nephew went on their way, quickly leaving the arena door, leaving Ning and the emperor alone in there. Ning looked at the emperor and quickly bowed in respect. It is an honor to meet someone of your status, your majesty, he spoke. He didn't know much about the emperor, so he decided to take it slow. He didn't even ask why he was made to stay back. The emperor looked at Ning for a few seconds before asking, Where did you find the pure essence to reach such a high realm? He asked. Ning thought for a moment and wondered if he should lie, but decided not to. Maybe the emperor knew what it was that he had eaten. I ate a fruit, your majesty, Ning answered. It helped me improve my essence a lot. The emperor frowned a bit. Fruit? He asked. Yes, Ning said. It was some sort of fleshy fruit that contained a lot of juice inside. The juice, from what I could tell, was a highly concentrated pure essence. That is how I started my essence journey. The emperor thought for a bit and asked, Was it white? Ning's eyes widened in surprise. Yes, he said. Do you know it, your majesty? Where did you find this fruit? The emperor asked. This one Ning had to lie about. He couldn't just tell that he had found it on top of a damn divine beast, or he would call him crazy. Even if he did believe him, he would then have to explain how he got to the turtles back in the first place. A few fishermen in our village found them floating in the ocean, and my father bought it from them. I, being a mischievous child, ate them when I found them, he said. The emperor certainly knew what the fruit was, or at least had heard about it, but he didn't reveal what it was to Ning. Instead, he asked another question. Your sword, may I see it? He asked. Ning was slightly perplexed at the request, but he didn't think anything weird with that. He had used an amazing sword, so the emperor would most likely want to buy it from him. He simply wasn't going to sell to him. He took the sword out from his storage artifact and presented it to the emperor with 2 hands holding either side. The emperor looked at it closely and nodded. Good sword, he said. He had confirmed up close that this was indeed the continental sword. Where did you find the sword? He then asked. It floated in the ocean and was pulled by the fishermen, same with the fruit. I think because I had eaten those fruits, it bonded with me, Ning said. The emperor looked at the sword again and spoke. I had initially intended on coming here to order you to give this sword to me. Ning's eyes narrowed the moment he heard that. In the back of his head, he had an inkling of this being a possibility, but he hadn't expected the emperor to be so blunt about it. I was going to force you to give me that sword, he said as a silver sword formed in his hand, with a unique essence that Ning recognized from one of the previous battles. Crystal essence. However, the emperor continued. Since you are going to become even stronger, most definitely, I cannot let you live. Thank you for bringing the sword to me. You can rest easy in your afterlife now. Ning's eyes widened as the sword slash came down at him with an incredibly fast speed. At the same time, crystalline spikes grew from behind him, intending to pierce his back while the old man cut him down from the front. He had already created a spatial portal to go through, which had appeared behind him out of nowhere. The crystal that sought to kill him from behind went into the portal from the other side, while Ning was trying to escape from this side. However, it was too late. The old man was simply too fast. Even if he had managed to surprise the old man by creating the portal out of nowhere, he would have still been cut down by this sword that he had no way of dodging. Suddenly, something struck the side of the sword, sending it aside so that it didn't hit Ning at all. Ning entered through the portal and fell 4 meters into the stage where he had made the come out. He quickly looked up through the portal to see what had happened and saw someone there that had saved him. Clara. He shouted in surprise when he saw that the person that had saved him was none other than the boss of Paradise Hunters, Clara Grazer. She held a dark sword in her hand that clashed with the Emperor's white sword, neither gaining an inch on the other. The Emperor was surprised, even confused as to what was happening for a moment. However, when he saw that the person in front of him was using shadow essence, his heart skipped a beat. "You," he couldn't help but say in a fearful tone. He recognized the face. How are you still alive?" "Surprised to see me, old man?" Clara spoke with a merciless grin. "Did you think you had killed us all?" No, he shouted. "Only the younger son should have been alive." "It was not the son, I'm afraid. It was the daughter," she said. "I had planned on letting the past be past, but no, now that I have my chance, I'm not going to let it pass. I am going to kill you." "I can't believe it," the Emperor said. "I had always thought it was the son that had lived, not the daughter. Not that it matters to me anymore. I never planned on going after you, but if you come to me yourself, I will simply finish the deed from 30 years ago." "You bastard!" Clara shouted and spikes of shadows grew out from underneath her. The Emperor, despite his age, nimbly jumped back to avoid the spikes, while sending his own crystalline spikes back at Clara. Clara pulled up a veil of shadow that devoured all the spikes. She was about to go back to attack the Emperor when she sensed movements from around her. She fell into the shadow beneath her, dodging the attacks that fell on her from all sides at once. The Emperor's guards had come to his rescue. The 7 men, all with different elemental essence, gathered where Clara had disappeared from and looked around. The Emperor frowned. "You lot, stay behind. You are not her match," he said. The guards turned back to look at the Emperor in utter disbelief. Each and every single one of them here was a true essence soul fighter. So how could the Emperor say that they weren't strong enough? Unless, fear grew in their heart for a possibility, which the Emperor confirmed when he spoke. "She's in the stellar harmony realm. You guys are absolutely no match," he said. They were shocked beyond belief, as the stellar harmony realm was nothing but a tale to most people that they only knew truly existed because the Emperor himself had reached it after hundreds of years of absorbing essence. He might have been slow, as finding crystal essence was damn near impossible in this world, but still, it was far more readily available than when compared to something like the shadow essence, which this girl had. Then, how could this girl have taken it? "The treasury was missing when we first looted the Grazer family," the Emperor said. "She must have used it all, a great essence crystal mine's worth of shadow essence, all in that little girl." The Emperor didn't know if he was getting angry or not. He had believed that he had stopped caring about the lost shadow essence, but seeing it being all put into one girl, he was quite angry. He looked around for the girl, but he couldn't see her at all. He closed his eyes and started sensing the world around him to find the girl that couldn't have been far away. As he was doing that, he sensed something else. Another person with a decent amount of essence was running away. He quickly opened his eyes and looked toward the stage when he saw Ning running away. "Capture him," he shouted, pointing at Ning. Ning had already made it past the stage, so he could quickly reach the gate if they didn't stop him. Once he left, it would be complicated. The 7 guards all turned to go after him at once when suddenly, one of them swung their hammer to the right. It was a man with fire essence that swung the hammer, and the one that was nearly hit was a person with wind essence. He had pulled up his sword at the last moment to block the hammer attack and was sent a few steps back, stumbling on the uneven stage. "What are you doing?" the other men asked, but the man with the hammer struck again. They dodged easily as the man wasn't very fast, but he seemed relentless. He was attacking them one after another. "What's going on?" the Emperor shouted. "Go capture." His words stuck to his mouth when he saw the pitch-black eye of his guard, who had most certainly been corrupted by shadow essence. The Emperor immediately looked down and stared in horror as the entirety of the stage was in nothing but shadows, and they were all stepping on it. Get off the ground, he shouted, suddenly creating a platform of crystal that pulled him up a few meters from the ground. The crystal wasn't in the shadow that Clara had gone into, so he felt safe. The guards tried to move as well, but the guard with the hammer continued attacking. The Emperor moved and threw a blunt crystal at the man with a rapid speed, hitting him on the side of the head. Create light, he shouted. The guard with light essence immediately created a brightly glowing light that drove away the shadow that the evening had placed in the arena. The light even seemed to be so bright that it drove away the shadow that covered the man with the fire essence. He looked around, dazed, and his head hurt a little. It was impossible to tell whether the Emperor's attack had been helpful in him waking or not, but he had, so nobody questioned. With the guard that created the bright light, they all felt safe. With brightness, they thought they sent away the shadow. Only, they had forgotten that the brighter the light was, the darker the shadow became. Clara appeared from behind the man that created the light with a black scythe in hand that moved imperceptibly fast the moment she arrived. The other people noticed and tried to attack her, but a veil of shadow appeared in front of them, and from it flew out crystal spikes that she had stolen from the Emperor early in the fight. When the veil was gone, so was she. In her place was the Emperor, who struck the ground with his crystal sword, barely missing her once again. Damn it! The Emperor shouted, we need to find her key. His words stuck to his mouth when something glowing appeared next to him. The ball of bright light disappeared as the man fell to the ground, his head rolling into the ground. In his stead remained an essence soul, one with bright butterfly wings, 2 antennas, and sharp claws for hands. The Emperor looked at it and immediately realized what had happened. One of his men had died, and his essence soul had come out. And it was most definitely going to want to fight them. The essence soul realm was a realm where one created an essence soul and grew it alongside them. They were both separate enough in that realm, and the essence soul even had intelligence. But it was little, and always overshadowed by the normal intelligence of the body, so it never showed up when the person was alive. However, when the body died and the essence soul remained behind, it finally had its own intelligence to control itself. And the intelligence it had was way too little to tell anything. Most essence souls were confused when they appeared. After all, they had no idea why they could even think. The body did it for them all the times before. However, now that they could, they knew that the body was gone. If the body was gone, it had died, and death frightened it. It had no intelligence to tell how it had even died, so all it could assume was something bad had happened. When it saw people around it, especially strong ones, it couldn't help but assume that it was these people that did it. So, when the essence soul of the light essence guard appeared among the 7 other people, its first thought was that it had been killed, and it was the 7 people that had been responsible. So, it was going to attack. Before it could attack, however, the Emperor sent crystals directly into the essence soul, driving it away from the other 6, into the lower area of the arena. The essence soul was pierced through and half gone when it looked back up and saw another volley of crystal come at it. After being struck by those crystals, it died and the soul dissipated into light essence, returning to the environment like a conduit that was destroyed. Unlike an essence soul that was attached to a body, an essence soul of a dead person had no essence core to pull their energy from to heal themselves. As such, if you damaged them enough, they would die easily. Still, if one had to kill someone in the essence soul realm, they had to do it twice, and that was incredibly difficult for someone in the same realm. Don't gawk around, the Emperor said. He had known what would happen, so he had taken action and killed the essence soul before it could attack them. Do you want to die at the girl's hands too? The people quickly shook their heads. The Emperor looked at where Ning was and his eyes narrowed. He had thought that Ning would have already run far away, but for some reason, he was still next to the gate. When the Emperor looked closely, he saw someone else at the gate that had blocked him. Sabern. He couldn't help but wonder when he saw the man. He was a little glad that Ning hadn't managed to run away, but he was also a little concerned about why Sabern of all people was stopping Ning. He was worried that Sabern would steal the sword from Ning before he could, but that didn't seem that bad an outcome. He could simply take it back from Sabern. If things went well, he could even pin Ning's death on his head and execute him while having nothing to do with the kid's death. Seeing that he had no reason to hurry down there, he decided to finish this fight. You 6 get away from me, and go catch that kid if Sabern lets him escape. I'll find this bitch for no, the Emperor said. The 6 nodded and ran away. The Emperor then closed his eyes and felt for the aura around him, especially one that sensed like shadow. His eyes suddenly opened wide and a grin appeared on his face as he jumped up. From below him, Clara appeared with her scythe, ready to kill him if she could. The Emperor swung his sword to stop the scythe and their battle continued. Ning had taken the chance to run away from the arena and go into the public where they would have a hard time justifying killing him. He could even go find the other rulers and ask for help, which he may or may not get. Anyway, he needed to get out of here first. However, when he got to the door, the man that he had only seen in passing had been waiting for him and immediately started attacking him. Ning fought a bit and had to go back into the arena as he was pushed back by this man that was a true essence soul realm fighter. He used wind essence, which was generally weaker among the essences, but given that he was so much stronger than Ning could do nothing against the wind at all. He teleported out using his space essence and tried to run away, but the man caught up to him and sent him back inside. Ning realized that he wasn't trying to kill him, at least, not until the Emperor was here most likely. "Give up, kid," Sabern spoke. "You're not going to survive this at all." "Who even are you?" Ning shouted. "Are you this region's fake ruler?" "You do recognize me," Sabern said. "Why even ask?" "Damn," Ning shouted, sending back a pile of rocks at the man that he shot using his sword. "Like father like son, I suppose. Attacking someone weaker than him, I see where your son got that trait from." Sabern tossed the rocks aside, revealing a face full of anger. "You don't have to run your mouth just because you were going to die," he said. "Die?" Ning chuckled. "We'll see." He was looking around for a way to run. Suddenly, Sabern sent a wind blade at him that targeted his right arm. The blade was so quick that Ning couldn't possibly dodge it at all. In a moment of panic, he swung his sword with essence poured into it. He wanted to create some sort of earthen wall, but seeing the wind blades, he could only think about wind and nothing else. Suddenly a massive gust of wind appeared from where he swung, destroying the wind blade and sending away Sabern along with it. Ning stood frozen where he was, looking in front of him where there was a large gouge on the land before him, a large cloud of Dude and Sabern who had flowed far away. Sabern balanced himself with a wind technique and looked back in shock. Had that been wind? Since when could the young man create such a large gust of wind, enough to throw back someone in the true essence soul realm? Ning was still very surprised, perhaps a bit too much even. He had just created a gust of wind, and it had not been from any technique but from the sword. He couldn't help but remember the words written on the piece of paper that the headmaster had handed over to him before he went to the match against that girl. It had said something that he hadn't believed at the time and had thought that he was being pranked. He was told that the sword he held, the one that he used to create the large earth pillar, was in fact capable of creating many more such essences with the same level of production. And that he had to use it in the battle. Ning hadn't believed the note. That had to have been false. After all, it went against what he understood about conversion as a whole. To convert something physical into a conduit, you needed to fill the object with essence. If the essence was similar, it could be used to create a fantastic conduit. If it was not, the effectiveness of the created conduit dropped by a lot. As such, someone with fire essence core would never create a water sword, even if it was possible, as the effectiveness of the sword would never be as good as what they could with a fire sword. Another truth was that the more the element was used for conversion, the harder it became. The increment in the types of elements used also exponentially grew the difficulty. Since people would rather just use two good swords, instead of a mediocre single one, no converter wanted to create something like that. The prince's axe had been a result of something similar as well, but he was done well enough that it didn't seem much of a problem. However, for something like his sword, which already had quite a lot of matter compacted into it, just imagine that there was another entire element and there was a possibility that was simply not there. Or at least that had been the case, until he sent out a gust of wind. Now that he had seen that, he had to believe, at the very least, that there was earth and wind element in the sword. Someone had managed to compact a lot of earth and fire into that sword, creating an artificial conduit at a level that was never before seen in this world. If it was incredibly rare. Earth and wind at the same time. Ning wondered what sort of genius could pull this off. When he thought about that, another possibility entered his mind. If this was the case, then was it possible that the rest of the elements that the paper had said would also be there? It had mentioned that it could use many different essences, more than just earth. Surely that didn't end at wind, right? Ning didn't know what exactly the elements in the sword were, but he knew where to start. He saw Sabern in the distance and saw him ready to fly back at him. Ning poured a bit of essence into his sword and imagined himself using another element in a different matter. This time, it was going to be water. The moment he thought that orbs of water appeared around him, surprising him positively, it had worked. There were nearly 8 different orbs of water that soon grew bigger and bigger until each and everyone was half the size of Ning. Then, he attacked. A sharp string of water flew out from the orbs at an incredible speed, piercing through the wind and the dust as they all targeted Sabern. Sabern realized what was happening and instantly used a wind technique. He was suddenly tossed into the sky, dodging the water threads that moved through underneath him. Ning looked at the man in the sky and pointed his sword, thinking of another element. Fire. A massive fire tornado that brightened the entire stadium appeared out of nowhere, quickly moving to where the White Owl region's unofficial leader was moving around. Sabern tried to move away, but the fire followed. Not only was the cyclone of fire quick, but it was also equally hot and damaging. It left glowing earth through which it moved, and burned anything else that was there. Sabern started getting annoyed at the fire and drew out a massive amount of essence before throwing enough wind below him to dispel the entire fire tornado at once, huffing as he did so. He couldn't believe that he, someone in the true essence soul realm, had to use up a lot of essence to just fight off a single attack from the young man. "You, bastard," he spoke, breathing in and out at a quick rhythm. He was as angry as he was surprised. Ning smiled at the man's anger. He wanted him angry. He wanted him mad. He didn't want him to have a good time. He was definitely here to kill and steal from him. There was no way Ning was going to let this be fun for him, even if he were to lose this match. The man, in his anger, used a lot of essences to create a massive wind saw in the sky that spun, threatening anyone that it would be coming for. Ning frowned when he saw that. He thought for a moment and put down the sword. At the same time, he put up his hand, pointing a single finger at the man and his wind saw. Then, he used something that hadn't appeared in this world in centuries. "You know, I should have frozen your leg to keep you from moving. I could have won if I did that," Alan said as reflected back on the match against his sister. "I would still have won," Elena mentioned. "I was ready to transfer my essence from one core to another. You might have won if you knew what I was doing. But since you didn't, you wouldn't." The two siblings bickered a bit on the street while their guards were too used to such a display to even be embarrassed. They simply walked next to them, sending away anyone that tried to come close to them. Well, even if they did, it wouldn't be for the prince or princess at all. After all, behind them was the crown prince, who walked without saying anything. The two siblings ignored their uncle for long enough that they nearly even forgot that he was there. When they did remember, they turned around to ask him for advice on which of the two was a better fighter in the competition. When they looked back, they saw their uncle completely lost in his own thought, not paying the two of them any attention at all. "Uncle?" Elena called out to him. "Uncle?" Alan spoke a little loudly, finally catching his attention. "What's wrong with you, uncle? Are we boring you? Just say so and we won't talk about the match." The man asked, completely not understanding what his nephew was even saying. Elena narrowed her eyes. She looked around discreetly and back at their uncle. "Are you all right, uncle? You seem sick," she said. "No, I'm all right," the crown prince said. He was all right, right? His mind was consumed with the thought that his father was going to do something once again out of impulsiveness and ruin the future of someone that could truly be the pillar of their land. He knew, just as his father said, that they could turn out to be evil and be a danger to their family. But wouldn't they be trying to befriend them? If you squashed every little bud that seemed strong enough to grow to be a giant tree, what would happen to the forest? There was strength in unity, and his father seemed keen on dividing it all. "Uncle, are you truly ill?" Alan asked, bringing his attention back to them again. Damien shook his head and nodded furiously. "I'm all right. You guys don't have to worry about me," he said, roughing up his nephew's hair. "Let's continue. We should reach the academy, folks, if we hurry," he said, continuing to walk through the road. The two siblings went back to talking about more mundane things, but they kept an eye on their uncle, who they were worried about. Had he been feeling under the weather? As they talked, the topic changed to Ning, who had shown such incredible results. Hearing them talk about it, Damien couldn't help but be a bit curious. "How is he? This Ning fellow. Do you like him?" he asked. "He's pretty good as a person, I guess. He's quite strong, but didn't appear arrogant at all," Alan said. "He's old too, around our age, but he never acts out age," Elena said. "It's hard to say what age he acts like. He seems completely oblivious to many obvious stuff, but he somehow still appears reliable." Right. That," Alan said. "Can you believe it? He said he would have likely beaten me if he wasn't slow to break through to the low essence realm. And somehow, I completely believe it." "He did?" Elena asked. "Yes," Alan said. "And I sensed his essence too. So pure, I can't help but wonder just what sort of essence soul he has formed. Do you know what a pure essence soul usually looks like, uncle?" He turned to ask his uncle, but his uncle seemed completely out of it. "Uncle?" he called out. Damien's mind raced from one side of the fence to the other, trying to make up his mind on what to do. He looked at his niece and nephew, their young and innocent eyes. The young man would be no different. So innocent, so happy, if he could keep them then. But he is most likely dead, Damien thought. But, if he was not. "I need to go," he said, turning around right there. "You two, take the prince and princess back to your academy friends as soon as you can." "Yes, Your Highness," the two young guards said in a serious voice as Damien rushed back toward the arena. They wondered what was happening, where he was going, but they had been ordered, so the two of them decided to leave. Damien employed the wind to his cause as he rushed as quickly as he could to go back to the new arena. He hoped, he prayed that his father hadn't already killed Ning. He wanted to help the young man survive. He couldn't let his father kill another innocent person again. He had been young and had no authority to speak to his father back then. He had done what he could to appear to be against him, but he never truly could. However, now he was going to. Even if it required him to directly oppose his father, he was ready to take on that option. He arrived close to the arena and sensed strong essence fluctuation from there. There were a few people outside, wondering what was happening inside, but they didn't go in. Damien, however, rushed without waiting. The moment he arrived at the door, he noticed the destruction there. He looked at the source of the destruction, Ning, who pointed high in the air. Damien looked up and saw Sabern creating a massive wind blade with which he was about to attack Ning. Damien wanted to help, but then he sensed something. A ball of dark colorful light flew into the sky, containing all essence and none at once. It struck the wind blade in the air and simply vanished into it. A moment later, however, it showed its effect. The wind blade exploded. Not all of the wind blade exploded at once, just a part of it. But that part alone was enough to tear the rest of the blade down to the point where none of it could even come close to Ning at all. Sabern looked at the scene in absolute shock as he had simply no idea what had just happened. One moment he was preparing his attack and the next moment, his attack got destroyed. By a low-essence soul kid? Had the world gone mad today or what? Damien looked at Ning in surprise as well, and so did the other 6 true essence soul realm guards who were standing far around Ning to just make sure he didn't run away from the location. Once the Emperor was done dealing with the girl that he was fighting with, he would soon come to deal with it. They too had no idea what Ning had done at all. Not a single person did, because not a single person knew what essence he had just used. It was black, and yet it was colorful. Like every other color mixed into one, shining through a veil of darkness that gathered it. What was that? Damien wondered. Ha ha ha. Ning laughed out loud when his technique worked way better than he could have expected it to. "You can't do shit, bitch," he shouted at the man in the sky. "Do you think you're safe? No, I'm gonna kill you." His roaring laughter caused the other people in the area confused and worried. Most didn't know what to think of the situation. There was no way someone at the low essence soul realm could possibly beat someone at the true essence soul realm, right? At least, that was what nearly all of them thinking. Sabern on the other hand wasn't thinking much at the moment. His mind was filled with rage. Rage at the fact that he was being humiliated by a youngster that was barely at the essence manifestation realm just a few hours ago. "You little shit," he shouted out loud as the green essence of wind flowed around him, covering him all around. At the same time, 2 giant bird wings spread wide behind him in the sky. Then he flew down at an incredible speed. Shit! Ning realized he was in great trouble. He poured essence into his sword, creating a giant pillar of stone out of pure instinct. At the same time, a portal opened up and he teleported somewhere close by. When he reappeared, he quickly closed the portal and watched Sabern burrow through the ground to land where he stood before. He looked around searching for Ning, saw him, and then paused. Ning was a little surprised that he paused, but then he saw someone standing behind him. He quickly turned around to see a person dressed in completely black that he had seen attack Clara in the audience area of the arena before. These were the Emperor's people. Now that Ning looked around, there were more people than he had thought. "Are you here to kill me?" he asked. "We do what the Emperor commands of us," the man said, bringing out a fire sword. "Now, just remain here, the Emperor will come for you soon." Ning's eyes rapidly moved around, trying to think of what he could do. He could fight this man, most likely, but could he fight the rest of the 5? And what if Sabern joined them? Could he fight them? He also saw the Crown Prince at the far end of the arena, walking towards him. Great, he thought. Another one to add to my problems. Ning was starting to get a little annoyed. "You, stand back," Damien shouted as he came toward the man. "Don't you dare touch him." "Your Highness," the man in black spoke, a little surprised to see the prince here. He was supposed to be with the twins. "No one will touch this young man while I am around," he said and walked up close to Ning. Ning was confused and even believed this was a ploy and remained alert. But the prince showed no hostility at all. "Your Highness, we are ordered by the Emperor to make sure this young man doesn't leave the premises of the arena." "I am afraid we cannot do as you ask," the man spoke even as he lowered the sword. "I don't care," the prince said. "I'm here to oppose my father. I'll oppose all 7 of you along with him." The man showed a slight grimace at the word 7, but the prince didn't see it. "Don't worry, I'll save you. I won't let my father do something like this again," the prince said as he patted Ning's shoulders. Ning was genuinely confused. Was this still a ploy? "Where is His Majesty?" Damien asked. He was a little surprised to see Ning alive for sure. He was sure he would have been dead by now. A few noises and a single finger from the black-clothed man took Damien's focus toward something that was in the distance, away from his sight. He turned around and saw his father, fighting. He looked at who he was fighting with and saw a girl dressed in black clothes. He watched only for a second when the girl brought out black spikes from the ground, trying to stab his father, who brought out white crystal spikes to fight back. He shot a few toward the girl, who quickly hid herself in the shadows, appearing at a different location to attack the Emperor. At that time, her hair flipped, revealing her fair and beautiful face to the light that shined on her. The moment Damien saw her, his heart skipped a beat. He walked away from Ning in a daze as he walked toward where the fight was. Those skills. Those essence. That face. He couldn't help but look at her in shock. Was it truly her? Was the love of his life truly returned again? He couldn't help but rush close enough to see her. When he did, he couldn't help but shout out her name. Clara. Clara swung a shadow scythe that she had created herself. It was a weapon that she had converted herself and thus used in a fight. She had only just destroyed the spikes that flew at her when she heard someone shout her name. She looked toward the voice and for a moment felt her heart drop. "Damien," she whispered, confused and melancholic at the sight of him. She didn't know how to feel about him. She had seen him in the competition, coming to save the one kid, and had thought to herself that she wouldn't interact with him ever, so she had nothing to worry about. However, she hadn't expected to meet him directly. What more in such a situation? She didn't know what to do, what to say. She had loved this man once, secretly, as he had loved him, but that was a long time ago. The love had ended when her family died at the hands of his. Her love for him had turned to hatred that day and then slowly died down to nothing as her hatred vanished. She had truly believed, until a year ago, that she would want nothing to do with the southern half of the continent as she wanted nothing to do with her past. However, her past didn't let go of her at all. Hearing him call out his name brought out the love she felt for him all those years ago, and at the same time, the hatred she felt for him. The Emperor saw that she was distracted and shot 2 crystal spikes at her again. Clara quickly focused back and swung her arm to fight off the first crystal. However, by the second one, she was too late. It struck her, right in the right shoulder, gouging out a chunk of it as it went past it. Immediately, she felt pain like never before. Her vision blurred and her ears went numb. She couldn't hear or see anything as she faltered to the ground. Without hesitation, she called for the shadows underneath her and disappeared into it. Inside the shadow, she floated, sunk, drifted, and hung all at the same time. She couldn't breathe down here. Neither could she see anything other than outlines of shadows. Even if she could, it wouldn't be helpful to her. At least, she was safe. She gained control of her senses as it all slowly returned to her. She hadn't taken a breath before coming down here, so she needed to do so again. She focused upward and saw two silhouettes in front of each other, seemingly talking. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could hear echoes. One of them was Damien. "Stop, father," Damien spoke to the Emperor. "What are you doing here, you idiot?" he shouted. "I sent you with the kids." "I came back to stop you," Damien shouted at his father, perhaps for the first time in his entire life. He didn't remember shouting before this. "Enough with the killing, father. How many people must you kill? How many more lives will you take?" "As much as I need to," the Emperor said. "You don't need to kill anyone, father. Please, stop with this obsession. Not everyone is a threat. Not everyone will hurt us," Damien said. "What if they do?" the Emperor asked. "Do you want to see your brother's corpse before you regret it? Do you want to see the twins murdered right in front of your eyes before you realize what you should have done? I do what I do so you and the damn family can sleep well at night. If you can't see that, then you are more stupid than I ever thought you were," the Emperor said. "Now, if you're done with your childish rage, move aside. I've got a ghost to kill." The Emperor walked past his son to where Clara had disappeared to. She had left behind shadow essence when she went into her escape technique, and he needed to sense it to see how far she had moved. There would be a trail left behind where she moved temporarily. If he could catch it, he could catch her. As he was searching, the girl came out, but not where he expected. She appeared, haggard and disheveled, next to his son and pointed 6 dark insect-like sharp limbs at him, all coming out from her back, made completely out of shadows. "Move, and he dies," she said, gasping for breaths that she missed while in the shadow space. She stared around her, looking for anyone that might come attack her, and looked back at the Emperor after realizing no one was coming. "Clara, it's me, Damien," the Crown Prince started speaking. "You stop speaking or I'll kill you," she shouted directly into his ears. The prince flinched, not because of the sound, but because the sharp needle-like arms that were coming out of Clara started digging into him a little. The Emperor frowned a little and also got a little curious. He was surprised that the girl hadn't immediately killed his son, and was instead taking him as hostage. Was she too wounded to get out of here on her own, or was something else going on? "I told you," he spoke. "You let your guard down and they will come for you." Damien remained quiet, finding it hard to say anything at all as the arms dug into him. He turned his head toward Clara and saw the angry look on her face. It reminded him of the old days, and remembered the fact that he could not protect her back then. The day he got the news from his father that the Grazers had died had been one of the worst days in his life. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry. Stop speaking, or I'll kill you," Clara shouted at him. Even as she did, he couldn't find it in him to stop his words. "I'm sorry," he said once more. I tried to protect you all, but I couldn't. I'm so sorry." Clara teared up, unsure herself if it was from the pain or from what Damien was saying. The sharp shadow limbs that grew out of her stabbed slightly deeper into him, drawing blood. However, she found it hard to push it any further. She steeled herself, bringing back the ferocity that she had lost with the pain. "Your apology means nothing to me," she said. "Your family is the reason I do not have mine today." The shadow dagger in her hand moved closer to his neck, and further and his neck too would start bleeding. Damien was instantly mortified at the thought that he was going to be killed here, all at the hands of the woman he had thought he had lost all these years. Somehow, that thought didn't bother him at all. He felt like he deserved it. The Emperor saw this all and thought something to himself. He grinned internally as he realized something. "You stupid little son," he spoke. "I told you we had enemies that needed to die so we could be safe. Do you see what I mean?" The Crown Prince's eyes widened. He was trying to say that now? When he was about to die? Did he not realize what was happening? His breathing increased rapidly as anger filled him. Words came out of his mouth before he could think, and he finally said what he had wanted to say to his father all these years. "You have enemies, father," he said. "Not we, you. Anyone who could become strong is a threat to you. Whether it was her family or the young man that is in the arena. You kill everyone that shows any sort of hint at becoming a strong individual. You do not see the good in them all. What you see is a reflection of your own heart. That is what you do. You think of ways not to befriend a person of higher authority, but to get rid of them. You have no faith in people at all, father, he said. I am ashamed to be called your son. Kill me, I would rather die. Damien closed his eyes, ready for death. He had said what he wanted, apologized to the girl and her family that he felt he had done wrong, and now he was ready to die. Except, the blade never came. Damn it, he heard Clara curse from behind him as he was pushed forward. He heard her run away and turn around to catch a glimpse of her disappearing into the shadows. Had she chosen to not kill him? Pathetic. The Emperor spoke to him as he rushed past his son, arriving at the location where Clara had disappeared into. You won't run away from me, girl. I have killed your people before and I can do it again, he shouted. A long snake-like white essence soul floated out of him and immediately expanded to become a massive snake in the sky. The Emperor used a technique, creating giant crystal spikes in the sky, and shot them into the ground. He made multiple ones of these and shot them down in a circle, enclosing the area where Clara had run off to. He threw spike after spike on the ground, and once there was not a gap remaining, he used his essence to grow out the spikes to a point where they completely enclosed the entire area in a dome. The inside of the area was dark and shadowy, so the Emperor immediately brought out a light sword and used it, creating a glowing ball of light that floated in the center of the dome. Then, he turned around, looking at the only piece of shadow in the room that Clara could now access to come above from her shadow space, his own shadow. There is nowhere else you can run off to, little girl, the Emperor taunted her. Come out quickly, so I can kill you. Ning sent a large burst of fire on the man that attacked him with fire as well. The two fires collided, the quantity and quality countering each other. Ning then ran away from the man when another one came up close. The man didn't attack him, but he also didn't let Ning escape. They were all waiting for the Emperor to be done with his fight so he could come and kill Ning himself. Ning was frustrated at the black-clothed men as he really didn't want to push back against them since they were strong enough to hold him on their own. He also saw Clara being captured in the dome and was worried about her as well. System, keep track of Clara, he said. Save her if any attack that lands on her ends up being lethal. Understood. He hadn't used his system in over half a year because of his own self-imposed rules, but he would be fine to break it if it was for someone else. Don't save me though. I asked for this, he said as he looked around, thinking of a way out of this sticky situation. Understood. Once the system's words vanished, Ning started trying to list down what was happening around him, and what he could do. The first fact was that Sabern had attacked him to keep him in the arena. Ning wasn't sure if he was under the Emperor's orders, but he surely was helping him. The second fact was that the Emperor was busy with Clara and wasn't going to attack him in the meantime. Damien was there as well, trying to break into the crystal dome, but completely unable to. The third fact was that the black-clothed men were here to keep him from escaping, and would only attack him if he tried to leave. If he stayed, they did nothing. Gathering all those facts, Ning couldn't help but frown at the knowledge that there wasn't any fact there that was especially helpful to him. No, he thought to himself. That's not true, there is another thing I'm forgetting. His eyes turned to Sabern in the distance. Fourth and probably the most important fact right now was this. Sabern was angry. Ning ran toward Sabern. He had a general idea of what he could do to get out of this situation as soon as he could, and it only lay in Sabern's direction. The other 6 people were about as strong as Sabern, but they were unified. If things got too dangerous, they would move in to help each other. But Sabern, it was rather unlikely. Maybe he would get some help if he was an actual ruler of this land, but as the fake ruler, Ning had more chances than not. Sabern, even through his seething anger, realized that Ning was coming toward him. He looked in the direction of the men that chose to not pursue him and wondered what he was supposed to do. Can I kill him or not? He shouted at the men. You must keep him alive for the Emperor, one of the men said. What about hurting him? He asked. Only alive, the men said. That was all Sabern needed. Instantly, the wings on his back unfolded, sending out multiple green feathers at Ning, all of which were made up of wind essence. These feathers were razor sharp and tore through the field as they went toward Ning, and would surely kill him if he did nothing. Ning didn't stop at all. Instead, he used his sword to create an earthen that was nearly 5 meters thick that stopped most of the feathers. The ones that did manage to pass through were weak enough that he could simply dodge it. For the ones he couldn't, he blasted a massive burst of fire that thwarted the rest of them. Wind covered him as well as he sped up and jumped over the thick earth wall. He crossed it all in a single leap and saw Sabern using another skill. A massive cyclone formed in front of Ning, threatening to engulf everything in the area. Ning frowned a little but quickly gained his composure as he pointed toward the incoming cyclone with his sword and used another skill. A massive blast of water that nearly pushed Ning back erupted out of the sword, hitting the cyclone with a volume that seemed to dwarf it as well. The cyclone, burdened by the force and weight of the water it now carried, destroyed itself as the remained water was flung into the air to come down as a short burst of heavy rainfall. Ning created a protective shield over him using the earth to stay out of the water, and when the water had disappeared, he jumped out of the cover and looked at Sabern in the distance who had managed to remain dry thanks to his wind skill. However, even if his upper body was dry, the water in the ground still surrounded him and was enough for Ning. Ning pointed his finger on the ground and Sabern sensed the essence. Lightning. He jumped at the last moment as a thunderous noise shook the ground. Ning's massive bolt of lightning spread through the ground but touched no one in the end. Sabern took the opportunity and used the opportunity to send 3 wind blades at Ning, none of which were particularly strong, but were strong enough to hurt him badly. Ning noticed that and quickly created a portal in front of him, through which the blades flew and came out on the other side, right behind Sabern. Sabern's wings fluttered once and a gust of wind threw the blades into disarray, which then dissipated into thin air. Sabern stared down at Ning, who seemed to be able to fight him on equal for some reason. Was it because he himself was holding back? Or was it because of the sword that was somehow creating many elements now? This wasn't working, but he was simply too angry to give up. He was already angry that he couldn't kill him, but not even being able to hurt him was not something he wanted to happen. At the very least, he wanted to cut off an arm or two. The green wings on his back widened as it slowly grew to be larger than before. Along with the wing grew a head with 2 ox horns and a face that looked not so similar to Sabern. No hands grew, but legs did, which looked like bird legs as well. They held talons at the bottom. Ning frowned a little when he saw that. One thing he knew now about Essence Soul was that they were generally in the shape of an animal or insect or plant, the last one being the rarest. As one grew through the Essence Soul realm, their soul would drift further and further from having human features and would quickly envelop the features of whatever it was that they started with. By the true Essence Soul realm, there were few human features left in an Essence Soul, and that was what was required. The lesser the human feature, the more one had the chance to enter the Stellar Harmony realm, where one's soul and body would become one. The soul could harness the power of one's body and the body could harness the power of the soul. Seeing how close to a bird Sabern's soul was, if he continued training enough, he could enter the Stellar Harmony realm in the future. This surprised and worried Ning. He was definitely strong enough that if he wanted to, he could have at least injured Ning, if not killed him. Now that the Essence Soul was out, he could use more techniques with even more effectiveness. The amount of essence he could pour into attacks now would be ridiculous. At this moment, there was only one thing Ning could do if he wanted to survive, just one thing. He needed to improve the power of his attacks as well, and for that, he needed to bring out his Essence Soul as well. Ning hadn't done this before, so he was a little worried about how it would go. However, this was no time for caution at all. So, with a blinding white light, his Essence Soul started forming behind him. A pure white ball of essence floated out from behind Ning. There were some wisps and tendrils of energy growing from the white ball, but they disappeared as quickly as they came and didn't remain there long enough to be a permanent part of the white ball. The people looking at him were surprised and confused at the same time. After all, what they were seeing was not something that they had ever seen before. "Is that an Essence Soul?" a person asked, very much flabbergasted by the situation. Sabern looked at the massive white ball that was nowhere near the shape of any living beings out there. He could not tell just what he was looking at. Ning took a deep breath and released it before looking toward Sabern. "Come, let us start again," he said. A small tendril floated out of the Essence Soul, that instantly glowed with blue light. At the next moment, A massive bolt of lightning flew through the sky, hunting for Sabern. Sabern swooped below immediately the moment he sensed the attack. He dodged the lightning bolt and came for Ning. Ning looked at the man and pointed his sword at him. I wonder what else it can do, he thought, and then used another essence. A geyser of mud sprung out from in front of Ning, shooting into the sky. Sabern had to stop and move away from it, to not get hit. He took a bit longer coming this time around, and when he did, multiple crystal spikes shot at him. Sabern stopped in his track again, having to dodge the crystals. When he dodged it, something else came for him. Magma. He dodged that too, but it had been really close. He could feel the heat as the magma went past him. He stood there for a moment, stupefied as to what had just happened, before flying in another direction as a massive ball of fire flew in his direction. He stopped at one point and instantly created a volley of wind feathers from his essence soul that he sent toward Ning. Ning frowned a little. This was the thing about using a conduit that was always a con. He could never use techniques with specific shapes, as the sword he used would never have that. He could create arrows, feathers, or some other shape. The most he could do was give a rough shape to his creations and hope it was good enough. A wall of rocks formed in front of Ning, followed by a wall of crystals. Both were thick enough that when the barrage of feathers landed on him, they were stopped. Ning pointed his sword to the sky. Another essence. Nothing happened. Okay, no void essence, he thought. What about the other one? That didn't work either. Light, he tried. It worked. A bright light spread from the sword, lighting up the area around him to the point that Ning himself had to close his eyes. The burst of light was mostly directly in Sabern's direction and was fast enough that he couldn't stop it. Of course, they were also so weak that it barely tingled the man when they landed on him. Ning then created a sandstorm around him, only now realizing this was why he could create a sandstorm during one of his fights when the sword should have been just a normal sword. Just how many essence does this damn sword have? He wondered. He threw the sandstorm in Sabern's direction while running in another direction to dodge the next incoming attack. Sabern was tired of this all. He wanted to end it, go kill the young man. He couldn't handle being played around by someone 2 realms lower than him. With the many people watching, he was destined to not have a favorable impression on the Emperor in 4 years when it would be his time to become the ruler of the White-Ole region. "Come here, you little bastard," he shouted, following Ning's essence even when he couldn't see him at all. He arrived out of the sandstorm and looked in Ning's direction. However, to his surprise, he couldn't see him at all. What? He thought, surprised. What's going on? Where is he? He could swear that he could sense him right in front of him, but he couldn't be seen. Sabern focused a little more and looked at the place more carefully. When he did, he noticed something that he would have otherwise missed easily had he not tried to look for it. Down on the ground, near a ruined spot, there was a small boulder, and next to the boulder was a shadow that was a bit too dark and large for that boulder. Shadow essence. The man looked in shock. That was one essence he was quite careful about, since that was what had gotten the grazers killed. He was well aware of the fact that it was the Emperor that had killed them, but had to act like he did not know that. "Do you think hiding there will help you in any way?" he asked as he prepared a tornado around him that he was ready to throw down. The wind gathered around him, green in color as it was filled to the brim with wind essence. As it gathered more and more, he got ready to send it all down at Ning. However, before he could do it, he sensed space essence form behind him. "You won't catch me off guard," he shouted, turning around at the last moment as he pushed the wind into the portal that opened. However, as Ning appeared out of the portal with his sword in hand, something else came from within him that terrified Sabern. It was an essence he had never felt before, being used by the massive pure white sphere that was the essence soul. A bubble of void essence spread out of Ning, erasing any and all essence that was in the surrounding, removing the tornado. Then, Ning arrived on top of the man who was temporarily without any essence to use and swung his sword. In a single strike, Sabern was cut into 2. Void essence was a simple essence that on its own did nothing. It was an amalgamation of essences that remained in a harmonious state where it could turn to any other essence it needed to. When it came into contact with anything that had any sort of essence in it, it would turn itself to the exact opposite of that essence, consuming it, making it vanish. It was called a void because everything that touched it disappeared, becoming a form of essence that was simply pure. Ning's void skill created a domain around him that destroyed any and all essence, including the skills that were used. As such, when he used it, Sabern could not use anything to protect himself. Ning landed on the ground and next to him was the now dead Sabern. No one expected Sabern to die. Why would they? He was fighting against someone that was 2 realms below him, so there was no threat to him. Sure, the person he was fighting was strong and had many tricks up his sleeve, but even then, pure strength was hard to beat. So, when the 2 halves of Sabern, cut diagonally through his chest, fell to the ground, no one could comprehend why that had even happened. Why had he not saved himself? It didn't look like he was caught off guard. And what was that essence they just sensed? The 6 men that watched Ning were more than curious to know what had happened to him. Even the prince that had given up trying to break in was now curious as to what was happening. As for Ning, he was panicking. Using void essence wasn't easy for him. To destroy the essence of someone as strong as Sabern, he had to use up a lot of essence. Due to that, his body was now in terrible pain that he couldn't handle, and the essence in his core was as low as just 1/10 of the total. He was lacking a lot of essence, but that wasn't even the worst of it. What was worse was that next to him, a green bird-like essence soul was slowly appearing from Sabern's corpse, the part that had the core. This was Ning's plan all along. He wanted to kill Sabern while he was angry and underestimating him. However, he did not expect to be so useless the moment he did so. Using void essence left him unable to use essence for a few moments, so he couldn't do anything right now. All he could do was jump up and run away from the location. Ning showed no hesitation in doing so as he quickly found himself running toward the closest man he could find. The black-clothed man that saw Ning coming toward him understood what was going on. Ning wanted him to fight the essence soul. He could easily run away and let Ning fight, however, there was a problem. He wasn't sure what the emperor would do if he left the young man die before he came. The man frowned for a moment before sighing to himself. He had no choice. 2 giant pillars appeared out of the ground around him, slowly becoming fists. They were less solid earth and more a collection of small rocks. He punched the bird-like soul that flew next to Ning. The soul reacted in time, using a barrage of feathers to attack the man. Shit. The man thought. His own essence soul was not non-humanoid at all, so he was weaker than the essence soul in front of him. He had quantity though, so he had to use it. While the man fought the essence soul, Ning made his escape. He ran away from the place, running in a direction to leave the arena if he could. However, another man in a black cloth arrived next to him and sent a burst of steam next to him, stopping him from running away. Ning stepped back and evaluated the situation again. He saw that 3 other people had run up to the other one to help him fight against the essence soul while this one fought Ning. Ning looked at the last man that seemed conflicted about who to help at first, but in the end, decided to help aid the man confronting Ning. Just then, Damien flew into the arena and arrived in front of Ning. "Go, leave this place," he told Ning before turning toward the men. "You will not stop him." "Your Highness, please," the man said, looking at the Crown Prince. "Don't make this hard for us. We're under His Majesty's orders." "If you won't listen to me, then fight me," Damien said and instantly created multiple blades of wind essence that he used to attack the 2 men at once. One of the black-clothed men created an explosion of steam to protect himself, while the other one created an ice barrier. "Run," the Crown Prince said to Ning, who was stunned that the prince was helping him. "Thank you," Ning said and ran away. The 2 men tried to catch up to him but the prince stopped them both. A tiger-like essence soul came out from behind him as he got serious about the fight. The 2 men got serious as well. It was going to be impossible for them to fight the Crown Prince without hurting him, and only remaining in defense wasn't going to help them at all. At the same time, Ning was running away, so they needed to stop him as soon as they could. However, before the fight between them even began, a loud voice spoke to them all. "Pathetic." The Emperor cried out as he arrived outside the Crystal Dome, Clara nowhere to be seen. The Emperor dashed forward and arrived in the arena, sending a crystal spike that pinned Sabern's soul to the ground. "He died, huh?" he asked. "Too weak. And he wanted to replace the grazers, HMPH. His eyes turned toward Ning, who was doing his best to run away. "No," the Emperor said. "You are staying behind. A spray of crystal surrounded the exit in front of Ning, who quickly opened up a portal to the other side. Even when he went through it, the Emperor followed behind him as well, going through the portal to grab him. He tossed him back, sending him through the portal that had yet to close entirely. Ning skidded along the floor, rolling for a few dozen meters before coming to a stop. The portal disappeared and the Emperor destroyed the crystals the walk back to where Ning was. Ning wanted to run away, but the black-clothed men had gathered around him, stopping him from going anywhere. "You guys leave," the Emperor said, walking back up to where Ning was. "That girl is wounded and should be coming out of the shadows anytime soon. Go and kill her. Even you lot should be able to do that now." "Yes, Your Majesty," the men said, and immediately ran toward the crystal dun where only a single door was available out of the place. They arrived outside, and circled it, ready to kill Clara. Ning was a little happy to know that Clara was still alive at the very least. Even though he knew the system would save her, he still couldn't help but worry about her. She had grown on him in just a few days he had spent with her, and knowing her tragic past, made him empathize with her even more. So she sunk into the shadows then, huh? He thought. It seemed he had no reason to worry about her. For now, he needed to worry about himself. He stood up, with pain all over his body, but not enough to keep him down. He looked toward the Emperor, who stood tall in front of him and glared at him. The Emperor held a light sword in his hand, which he had used against Clara. The Emperor watched him slowly stand up, then turned to look in the direction of where Saburn's corpse was and where his essence soul was pinned to the ground. "Not bad," he said. "To kill someone in the true essence soul realm is not an easy feat. You are a strong fighter, stronger than what you showed in the tournament, it seemed. You would have certainly won against my grandchildren had you had the chance for it." Ning grinned at the man, hiding his grimace. "Well, thank you for the kind words," he said. "I will definitely appreciate that as you try to kill me." "Sarcasm?" The Emperor raised his eyebrow. "Cope with it however you wish." "Father!" the Crown Prince shouted. "The woman you love is about to die at the hands of the royal guards," the Emperor said, without even looking toward the prince. "Are you going to stay here and save him, or are you going to go save her?" The Crown Prince looked stunned for a moment, staring at his father and then toward the crystal dome that was surrounded by the guards. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do. "Save me," Ning said. "Clara will be fine, I promise." The Crown Prince hesitated even more. On one side was perhaps the most talented youth in the history of Blackhawk Dominion, and on the other side was the woman he had loved since they were but mere teenagers. The prince wanted to save what could be the future of his country, but he also wanted to save the woman he loved, the one he thought he had lost and had come back. He couldn't bear to lose her again. "I'm sorry," he said, and turned around to run toward where Clara was. The Emperor finally looked at his son leave and sighed. "Truly pathetic," he said. "Guess I'll need to prepare Darman to take over the throne. I let this one try and change himself, but it is clearly not happening." "Maybe you're just a bad father," Ning spoke. "That's not something you should say to your executioner," the Emperor said, turning back toward Ning. "You could die this way, you know." He swung down his sword without warning. Ning had been ready for it, but even so, it was very quick. He barely managed to move a bit to the left when the sword fell on his left arm. The muscle on his left arm was flayed open, the sinews and bones inside being clearly visible for a moment before they started bleeding. At the same time, before the pain hit Ning, he swung his sword as well, slashing at the Emperor's wrist. The Emperor pulled back his hand, but the sword was too long to fully pull back, and as such Ning hit it. The entirely light sword shattered in a single hit by Ning, turning into motes of light that brightened the dark area momentarily before vanishing altogether. "Not bad," the Emperor said. "As expected, the Continental Sword truly is the greatest legendary treasure of all time. The fact that I managed to find it centuries after it went missing is a blessing in disguise for sure." "Don't get so excited, you're not getting this sword," Ning said with a pained look on his face. The wound on his arm hurt him so much that his vision blurred to the point that he nearly fainted to protect his mind. However, he persevered. He had managed to stay awake and now, he wanted to do anything to get away from here. He pointed his sword toward the Emperor as he started pouring essence into it as much as he could to use an element, any element. Fire, water, magma, ice, steam, any would work. He just needed to use it. His mind landed on magma as it felt the most damaging of the lot and used. A crystal sword flashed by a second and Ning's right arm that held the sword was ripped from his torso, the sword and arm falling to the side. The last attack that was supposed to save him never even formed before he was defeated by the Emperor. Ning cried out in pain, finally, as his other arm was ripped away. The left arm hurt because it was flayed open, but the right one was completely gone, and yet he felt the felt on his arm that wasn't even there. The Emperor ignored the pain and wounded Ning before walking over to the sword that had been flung to the side. He kicked Ning's arm to the side and stood in front of the sword with greedy eyes shining at the prize. "You!" Ning cried out. "You truly," he couldn't form words. The pain kept taking away his focus from the thoughts that he tried his best to form. He couldn't speak his mind at all. "Shut up," the Emperor said without glancing back. He didn't want anyone to disturb him while he made the sword his. He let Ning suffer for the moment and reached down to grab the sword. His hand gripped the hilt of the sword tightly and he pulled on it. Instantly, he felt the unbudgeable nature of the sword. He grew blue and red in the face, turning purple as he tried his hardest to pull on it. But even with the strength of a stellar Harmony Realm individual, he couldn't even budge a single dirt off the sword. It lay on the ground, unmoving. "Truly amazing," the Emperor said. "This is a sword that holds the weight of half a continent." He smiled as the years of knowledge that had been passed down through his ancestors were finally helpful to him. He tried to move the sword around a bit more and only smiled more when he couldn't move it at all. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! He laughed out loud with happiness he hadn't felt in ages. Clara looked toward the Emperor even though she was fighting for her life at the moment. She was surrounded by the 6 True Essence Soul Guards, who normally should have been easy for her to win against. However, she had lost movement in her right arm, and her left leg was completely cut off. She had formed a fake leg with shadow essence, but it would be destroyed if it took too much damage. Behind her grew out a massive black shadow essence soul. It was a giant black spider with 8 pitch black eyes that seemed to stare into the soul of a human being. It was wounded too under the constant barrage of attacks that Clara had received. She was wounded and confused. She looked to her left at the prince who fought against his own people to protect her. Why did he do that? Did he really feel guilty about killing her family? She couldn't forgive him though, but she also needed his help. The other 6 were staying far away, so they only attacked her and didn't take on any attacks themselves. She looked at Ning in the distance, wounded and dying. She wanted to help him, but her own life was at stake at this point and there was nothing she could do about him. He was going to die, and she could only let that happen. "I shouldn't have fought," she thought. "I shouldn't have attacked him, and instead should have just taken him away." She regretted her past actions, but that was of no use now. She could only hope for the best. At worst, she was going to die before they could torture her. The prince knew he wasn't going to die, but he was still being attacked so much that he would get injured if he couldn't hang on there properly. Even with his essence soul out, it was a risky situation to fight in. Ning was all alone at the moment, but that did not make him scared. "You're not getting that sword," he said loudly, fighting back his pain. The Emperor turned around with a confused look. "Now, why would you say that?" he asked. "You're dying. What are you going to do with it?" "Even after I die, you won't get that sword," he said. "I'm certain that you require extremely pure essence to bond with that sword. Otherwise, it's not happening." He wasn't sure if that was the case, but he had a hunch about it. He couldn't imagine why else the sword hadn't been bonded until now or had records of being used anywhere else. "Do you know about the sword?" the Emperor asked. "I'm certain you do not. This is a sword made by someone so strong that he converted half a continent and everything inside of it into a sword. This is a sword that can use almost all of the essences in the world. You don't need a pure essence to bond to it," he said. "You only need it to be unbounded. Which, unfortunately for you, means you will now have to die." "Even if I do, you won't get your hand on the sword," Ning said, feeling his vision slowly fade, his head a jumbled mess. He was rapidly losing blood and he couldn't do anything about it. "You know?" the Emperor spoke. "For a kid, you talk a lot of crap. And here my son was suggesting that I let you marry Elena to bring you into the family." Those were the words Ning last heard before a single tone enveloped his hearing. Still, he replied back with what little voice he had. "Sorry, I'm not interested in someone so young, even less to become part of your family," he said. You can kill me now. He closed his eyes and lay there. Okay, the Emperor said as he used a bit of essence. Crystal spikes appeared from beneath Ning, shredding his body as they all pierced through it, killing him in an instant. The Emperor shook his head and turned around to grab the sword. Now that the sword's owner was dead, he could finally claim it. However, when he looked at the sword, his eyes widened in shock. The sword was not there at all. Where? He searched in shock. Then, a voice drifted from a distance to his left. Looking for this. The Emperor slowly turned around to look in the direction of where the voice had come from. There, on one of the broken crystals that were on the ground, he saw a man sitting on it. The man looked older, in his early 30s, but quite handsome. He wore weird clothes that the Emperor hadn't seen before, but all of that was sidelined in the Emperor's focus when he saw that sword in his hand. Who are you? The Emperor asked. Put that sword down, it's mine. Ning grinned from ear to ear, before looking down on the sword in his hand. Goddamn, it really is so heavy, he said, moving the sword around a bit. I've never used something so heavy before. He looked below him at the crystal that he sat on that seemed perfectly fine. It's heavy for me, but the weight isn't real, huh? He spoke. That's quite fascinating. Should I bond with it? You damn brat. Answer me when I'm speaking to you. Who are you? The Emperor shouted in a fit of rage that caught the attention of the guards to the side. Ning touched his face with his left hand. Do you not recognize me? He leaned to the left and looked at his dead body, which looked like a pin sack with the crystal spikes that came out of it. He couldn't even see what his face looked like. Well, I did say I needed a slightly different face, he mentioned, turning around to the Emperor again. In case you still haven't recognized it, it's me, Ning. Who? The Emperor asked. Ning gasped exaggeratively. Old man, you just killed me. How do you not recognize the person you just killed? Look at me. I don't even look human anymore because of what you did to me. What? The Emperor asked, a look of confusion on his face. Ning ignored the Emperor and looked to the right where the dome was. Hey, stop fighting now. It's over. I died, he shouted at them. The few guards who were still attacking stopped in confusion and looked around to who had just arrived. They saw the Emperor and then Ning. Clara, come here, he said, waving the large sword in the air. Clara could barely hear him, let alone see him. She couldn't even walk because of the lack of leg, and yet, somehow she moved. Outside of her own control, her body flew from the dome, going past the guards who tried to attack her and arrived next to Ning in an instant. Are you all right? Ning asked her when he was in front of him before grimacing a little. Sorry, you're not all right. He tapped her forehead a little and suddenly her leg that she had lost started growing on its own. The wounds on her shoulder healed, and the other wounds that she had acquired over the course of the battle today healed as well. The 6 guards of the Emperor arrived next to him and watched in horror at the growing limbs and squirming skin. How was this happening? The Emperor himself was shocked to see what was happening here exactly. How was he healed? For one thing, the Emperor was more confused at the fact that he couldn't sense any essence from this man at all. That was the most confusing part of all. Was that how he managed to come here? But then, how did he heal the girl? The Emperor was so confused that he had already stopped believing at all in the possibility that this truly was Ning and not a different person that had come from nowhere. The Crown Prince arrived a moment later than everyone and stood a distance away from them. He saw Clara next to Ning and saw that she was fine, healed completely. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. Are you all right? Ning asked Clara, who looked around in surprise and confusion. Clara was low on essence and thus felt pretty lethargic because of it, but other than that, she was fine. She stepped away from Ning, looking around in shock. What had happened just now? How was her consciousness so clear all of a sudden? How were her arms back? Did you hear me? Ning asked. Are you all right? She turned around and looked at Ning before slowly nodding. I am, she said. Who are you? It's me, Ning, Ning said. I know I look different, but I don't really want to de-age this body. Sorry. You're Ning? Clara asked. Yes, Ning said. I'll explain it all to you once we go elsewhere. Let's leave. He jumped off the crystal. He only took a few steps to walk away when the Emperor shot multiple crystal spikes around his feet. You won't leave until you hand me over that sword, the Emperor said. Ning looked at the sword and back at the Emperor. He gave an annoyed look and said, "Old man, you killed me. You ended my adventure in this world, and now I'm back to being myself. Consider that a win for yourself and please leave. If you try and force something to happen, you'll only end up killing yourself and your men," Ning said. "Huh. A bunch of big words for someone without essence," the emperor said. "Oh." Ning widened his eyes. "Are you sure it's me who doesn't have essence, and it's not you who can't sense it?" The emperor frowned a bit. That had crossed his mind as a possibility, but that surely couldn't be possible at all. For the man to evade his essence senses, one of two things had to be true. He either had no essence or very minimal essence, or he had to have so much essence that he couldn't sense it at all. "No, I should be able to sense it even if the man was in the damn divine realm," he thought. The possibility remained that he didn't have much essence. He must have wasted it all to make that sword his, the emperor thought and smiled. "Ha, your bluff doesn't work here. Hand me that sword, or die." Ning looked at the crystals around him and back at the emperor. "Are you sure you want to fight me, old man?" he asked. "The best case scenario for you out of this will be to walk away without your essence core." "Ha, that's a lot of talk for someone without essence," the emperor said. "I was going to let you go, but I'm afraid I cannot do so. You bonded with the sword, and like him, I must kill you too." "Father, YAR, shut up. I do not want to hear a single thing from you," the emperor said before turning back toward Ning. "You should not have taken that sword. I found this sword, so this is my SW. A crystal spike struck him in the head out of nowhere, bursting into a million different shards as it spread all around Ning. Clara was pelted a bit by the shards too, but other than that, she wasn't hurt. The emperor was about to go grab the sword, but when he saw that nothing happened to Ning, he was confused. What did you do?" he asked. He hadn't felt him use any essence, so he couldn't understand what had happened. Surely he didn't just stand there and take the attack directly, did he? Ning sighed. "I told you not to do this," he said, "and yet you still do. You won't understand with words, will you? I guess it is only fists that will help you understand." Ning started walking toward the emperor. The emperor attacked once more, sending massive amounts of crystals to kill him at once, and yet when they struck Ning, they all shattered. Many were even destroyed so badly that they turned back into essence. And yet, not a single scratch appeared on Ning's body. Finally, the emperor felt scared. He felt no movement from essence in Ning. He felt no armor, and he definitely saw that he didn't move at all. And that started scaring him for the first time in a long time. He realized he was dealing with something that he couldn't make sense of. Something foreign from everything that he had been used to. Something unknown. As Ning got closer, the emperor was terrified. "Kill him," he ordered his royal guards, who immediately jumped into action. 6 different essence souls appeared out from behind Ning, each one growing over 10 meters tall in an instant. There were souls with wings, souls with weapons, souls with a flower growing out of them, and various other little traits that showed that their souls were slowly changing from a human soul to something different. A little bit more change and a heap of essence later, these people would enter the stellar harmony realm as well. Ning cared not for that realm, so this realm did nothing to him either. A flash of light burned as a massive fire serpent devoured him where he walked. A green blade fell into the fire, causing an explosion that brightened the entire area for an instant. A giant rock spike grew out from the ground and was pulled into the air before it was dropped where Ning was. It crashed into him without the fire, and no one could tell what happened to him at all. The guard with a steam essence core quickly sent out a strong, fast stream of steam that blew into the place where Ning was at. The steam would be of such a high temperature that it would rival the flames while adding more heat to the location. The ones with water and ice attacks held off from attacking for a moment. They wanted the heat to deal with Ning and then they used their attacks. Both ice and water attacks landed where he was at the same time, adding so much force to the ground that the very structure of the arena shook to the point where it was going to shatter. Clara was shocked at the attacks that were dealt to Ning. Not even she took that much damage at once when she was fighting earlier. The open area had given them a lot of levity on where to attack and who to. The emperor looked seriously at where it happened and waited for the dust and smokes to settle down before finding out if Ning was dead or not. However, he didn't need to. "Did you think that would kill me?" Ning's voice came first, and then the man walked out himself. The emperor gawked in terror when he saw that there was not a single scratch on his body at all. You? Who? No, what are you? He asked in fear. Me? I'm the man you just tried to kill, Ning said. Now, it's time for payback, right? Attack him again. The emperor shouted before turning around to run away. He needed to get out of here as soon as he could. He didn't look back and ran toward the other side of the arena, but before he could get far away, he slammed onto a strong wall and fell back. He held his nose started bleeding and quickly looked up to see what he had hit. To his surprise, Ning stood in front of him, with hands in his pockets and eyes that looked down on him. Is this all you can do? He asked. Kill those that are weak, run away from those that are strong? Pathetic. He threw the man's own words back at him. Why you? What are you? You're not a human, he shouted. You're not wrong, Ning said. I am more than a human. Don't kill me, please, he shouted. Oh? Ning raised an eyebrow. Did you think that would work? Did it work when the Grazer family and servants were burned alive that day? Did it work when Jernan asked you for forgiveness after the duel? Did it work when your father asked you not to kill him after you poisoned him and forced him out of the throne? The emperor's eyes went wide. How do you know that? He asked. Doesn't matter, Ning said. The thing that matters is, you are not getting away from this without any consequences. The guards turned around after realizing that Ning had already run away and their emperor was in trouble. They moved to attack, but their emperor was in between, and thus they had to stop. I don't really care that you killed me, Ning spoke to the man. I was bound to die from the beginning anyway. I started this adventure to live how a normal person would go through the same problems an ordinary man would, Ning said. I will say I didn't exactly start at the bottom like a normal man, but I still liked my adventure. An adventure that I knew would come to an end someday. I just didn't expect it to come to an end this soon. I'm not angry with you or anything for killing me. That was part of the adventure too, Ning said as he looked around at the people that stared at him. But, even after all that, even after I told you that I would kill you if you attacked, you still let your greed take over you. You are one greedy man, Darren Black, Ning said. And keeping you as the emperor will only harm the people of this land. Let me do them a favor and get rid of this strength of yours that gives you this green and confidence. Ning slowly raised his sword. No, the man shouted, using the entirety of his essence pool to create spikes out of the ground to try and kill Ning. However, before the spikes could hit Ning, someone clanged and the entire first batch of spikes was completely cut in half, the upper halves thrown off to the side. More came from the ground, and Ning's hands moved faster. It was a blur to everyone as no one could see what exactly was happening, but the sound of clanging was clear to them all. Ning was destroying the spikes as they grew out of the ground. The emperor used his entire pool of essence and yet it all fell apart in the end. Not a single one could hurt Ning at all as he somehow managed to tear through it all. He managed to tear through an all-out attack made by someone in the Stellar Harmony realm as an act of desperation. And he only used his body to do so. The emperor's fear peaked as he started crying out loud, begging Ning to let him go. However, Ning didn't listen to him at all. You killed me because you wanted this sword, right? Ning asked. Even without knowing how it was made, I could already tell that it was a special sword. Now that I know all about it, it's simply remarkable that I was even able to find this sword. He showed the sword off by pointing it at the sky. This is what caused you to be greedy, right? Ning asked. Well, I might as well use it then. Ning's left hand moved forward, stopping the 6 guards from moving in using his telekinesis skill. They struggled to move and even use their essence, but nothing worked. Just stay there, will you? I don't want to kill anyone else, Ning said, flipping his sword over as he placed the tip over the man's core in his lower stomach and smiled. You wanted this sword, didn't you? He asked. You can have it. He let go of the sword as it fell straight into the man's stomach. Because the emperor wasn't bonded with the sword yet, he felt the weight of a continent pierce through his stomach and dig into the ground beneath him. The emperor cried out a scream that he had never made before, as he felt the essence core in his body that he had worked so hard to form had been destroyed. With that, it also destroyed the connection between him and his essence soul. The snake-like body flew out of the emperor, even though he hadn't died yet. As soon as it appeared, it sought to learn why it had died. That was the instinct it had with its limited intelligence. It looked around itself, seeing Ning and the others, searching for any strong individuals. It ignored Ning completely as he had no essence in his body right now, and looked in the direction of the 6 guards that Ning had now stopped using telekinesis on. Ning reached down and pulled out his sword from the emperor, who seemed to have fainted from the pain. His screams could no longer be heard at all. The essence soul was ready to attack the people when Ning arrived on top of it. You disappear. Ning swung his sword once, and in that one strike, the snake was cut in half, turning back into the essence it was made out of. He landed down below, in front of the 6 who could only look at him in terror. They did not want to have anything to do with him. Your emperor is alive, Ning said. Albeit he had lost his essence core and is now no more than a normal human. If you can stop the bleeding in time, you should be able to saw. His words stopped halfway through, and then he sighed. He could only turn around as Clara had already arrived next to the emperor with a black scythe in her hand. Ning looked at her, completely silent, as he had no reason to interfere in that fight. The guards moved, although it was already too late. This is for my father, mother, my little brother, and everyone from my family that you killed, Clara shouted. Die. She swung her scythe and cut through the emperor's neck, killing him at once. The guards arrived in time to catch her, but before they could reach her, Ning teleported in between them. Are you done with your revenge? Ning asked her. Clara simply nodded without saying a word. Good, Ning said, turning around to grab her arm. Then let's get out of here. Clara was confused, terrified, and felt all sorts of other emotions as she tried to figure out just where the hell they were. Her own emotions from having just taken a revenge that was nearly 30 years old were overwhelming her, and now she felt others that she couldn't explain. She looked around at where she was. First thing that surprised her was that it was daytime right now. Had she fallen asleep somehow? Where had the last 12 hours disappeared to? And then there was the fact that she was stepping on sand, looking at the vast blue ocean in front of her. What exactly was going on? You're tired, right? A voice spoke behind her. She quickly turned around to see the older Ning, laying down on the sand, enjoying the sun. Once again, she saw the weird clothes he wore and looked worried and confused. Who are you exactly? She asked. Are you really Ning? I am, Ning said. Come sit. I'll tell you what you want to know. Just rest for now. She took up his advice and sat on the sand, lying back as she looked at the clear blue sky. She didn't speak, and neither did Ning. The silence brought her to a calmness that forced her to think over things. She had done it. She finally got time to realize that she had managed to do something that she had wanted to for the last 25 years and had given up on already. She came to the understanding that she had avenged her family, and that brought her to tears that no pain could ever. I did it. She cried without closing her eyes, staring directly at the sky. I did it. Ning smiled and looked at the sky as well, letting her cry for a while. The gentle ocean wind blew across them, and the two stayed there for a while. Are you done? Ning asked her. Yes, she said. Are you really Ning? Ning chuckled at the question. How many times must I answer before you accept it? He asked. I saw your dead body, she said. It's hard to accept it, you know? I know, Ning said. How should I explain this then? I am not someone from this world to begin with. Clara nodded for a second before cocking her head to the side to look at him in confusion. What do you mean by that? She asked. I'm not from this world, Ning said. I come from the stars basically. Liar, she said. It's not a lie, Ning said. How would you come from the sky? You can't live up there. People have tried to go there, but no one can breathe after a while. They all come down, she said. True, Ning said. But I live on a planet just like this. I don't trust you, she said. Ning smiled. Then why don't you take a look? Clara disappeared for a second and appeared on top of a large building, looking down on a world with boats that flew in the sky and people that flew even higher. Many people looked at her in confusion, and some even came to check on her. Before they could do anything though, she disappeared, arriving back on the beach. WHWH, what was that? She shouted in fear. My world, Ning said. The one I came from. It's a different world from yours, isn't it? What did you do to me? She asked. A hallucination. No, I sent you to my world for a second, Ning said. Was it fun? No, it was scary, she said. How can there be so many carriages and people that fly in there? Does everyone have wind essence? Oh, there is no essence in my world, Ning said. It is instead filled with chi and mana. A different type of energy that follows similar rules as essence, but manifest as completely different laws. Chi. Mana. The girl looked confused. You don't have to worry about those, Ning said. Just know that I am not from this world. That is enough for you. Then, who was the Ning that we met? If that is you, how are there two of you? She asked. There aren't two of me, exactly, Ning said. I just have multiple bodies, and with multiple bodies, I can change around to whatever I want. Then, what was that? She asked. Why were you in that weak body? Why did you hide your strength? You could have done so many things with the strength you have right now. I can, Ning said. But I chose not to. It's not easy living a fun life when you are so strong. Life gets boring soon. So, when I came to this world, I sought to do something, Ning said. Have an adventure that a normal person would have. So, I made myself a weak body and started my journey. Not that it started so normally. I was only in the town for just 2 days when I was roped into your gang, forced to fight for you. It was certainly not normal, he said. So you lied about your amnesia? She asked. Of course, Ning said. I couldn't tell you where I really came from. He grinned at her, which she refused to look at. She thought for a second and asked another question. Now that your adventure has been cut short, are you going to make a new body? Can you do that? No, I'm done with my adventure as a normal person in this world. I've achieved what I could have achieved as a normal person. Now, I live as myself. I'll roam the other continents for a while and then maybe I will decide to leave this planet too, finally, he said. Clara didn't really understand what he meant, but she understood enough. All right, she said, getting up from the sand. Now that you've said so much, tell me this. Just where the hell are we? This? Ning asked, looking around at the small island he was on. This is the place I arrived on when I came to this planet for the first time. When I first came to this planet, I arrived on this island, Ning said. At that time, I had removed my memories about everything regarding essence and started my adventure here. That was about, not so long ago, he said. I took you here so you could get away from your problems for a while. Clara nodded. She looked around at the serene scenery around her. Why is it daytime? She asked. Because we are on the other side of the planet, Ning answered. We should be somewhere between Springland and Blue Flame continent. I think we will reach the Blue Flame continent in a few days if I'm not wrong. Oh, she said. She was just too surprised by everything else to be surprised by this as well. She simply acknowledged what was happening and nodded. Rest for a bit. I'll take you somewhere after a while, he said, letting Clara rest. He prepared a simple hammock between the trees on the island and let her lay there while he stayed in the sand. He looked at the beautiful blue ocean, the bright trees, and everything in between. It was so quiet, so peaceful. Compared to the place he had just been to, this felt like paradise. Emma will love this, he thought, connected with his other body inside his inner world. He realized that barely a day had passed in the time he was gone and sighed. He was with his wife, who quickly realized he had changed. What's wrong? Are you checking in? Ely smiled. No, not checking in, Ning said. I'm here to bring Emma out. It's a new place, so I think she'll love it. Is it a fun place? Ely asked. Yes, Ning said. And why are you not calling me then? Ely said. Father-daughter time. No moms allowed, Ning said. Ely chuckled. All right, go enjoy your time with her. But I'm next. I want to see the many worlds too, she said. I promise I'll bring you out before I leave this world, Ning said, and quickly released his divine sense and found Emma with the other kids, teaching them how to cultivate. She was the strongest cultivator and mage on Earth, so she spent her time teaching when she could. Ning quickly told her what was happening and she came running back. Other world? She asked in surprise. Really, Papa? Of course, Ning said. Let's go. Wait, I need to say goodbye, Emma said, trying to go to her mother, but Ning stopped her. You'll be gone for a day at most. No need to say any goodbyes. Let's go, Ning said, throwing Emma out into the world of Astoria. As soon as Emma was out, she looked around, confused for some reason. What's wrong? Ning asked. Do you not like the place? It's only an island for now. We'll go to different cities soon. No, that's not it, Emma said. I feel weird, weak. I think it's because I'm not on Earth anymore. Ah. Ning realized what was going on. System, will there be a problem with Emma staying away from Earth? No immediate problems will occur from her staying away from Earth because of his unique situation as a living being that is a will. However, because she is no longer on Earth, she will no longer have any means of using either her chi or mana unless she is in a world with that. Also, the energy that she can use as a will won't regenerate as her world is in another verse from this one. As a result, she will start losing her energy as a will and will need to return back to Earth to gain more of it. How long can she last? Ning asked. Depending on the situation, it can be anywhere from a year to a decade. And if she does lose her energy, she won't have any real problems, will she? Ning asked. Aside from not being able to do the many things that will can do, she will have to live as a normal human being. Of course, as a high-level body cultivator, she will neither age nor have any problems living with the mortals. Great, Ning said. Did you hear that? Emma nodded. It seems I have nothing to worry about, she said. Who's that? A voice called from behind them. Emma turned around and saw the black-haired Clara. She turned to Ning and asked, since when did my ring have this language? I added it just a little bit ago, he said and turned to Clara. Come, meet my daughter. Daughter? Clara looked surprised. Her? This is Clara. Say hello, Ning said to Emma. Greetings, Clara. I'm Emma, Emma said. It's great to meet a person I know nothing about. What? Clara looked confused. Don't mind her, Ning said. Why are you down? Go rest. We'll leave once you're rested. Sorry, hello. I am Clara. You're pretty. Clara couldn't help but add the last sentence on her own. It was hard to beat the beauty of a planetary will that was modeled after the humans that were born there. Emma touched her face, wondering if that will become a problem here. She still looked no older than 15 years old at most, but that would be hard to stop creeps from trying to get to know her. But, how is your daughter here? Clara asked. Clara, it's better if you don't ask these questions, Emma said. The answers you get will be more confusing than the question itself. Just know that I am his daughter and now I am here as well. Clara looked at Emma and frowned a bit. Ning tapped Emma on the forehead. Be more respectful with your words, he said. Huh? I am respectful though, Emma said. No, you are not, Ning said. She thinks you are a 13-year-old child who is being rude to her. If you don't want to stand out, you will need to learn to be more adaptable. You will need to act your age and only then will you start having fun. Clara went to rest and fell asleep pretty soon. She was already exhausted from fighting and being wounded, and having avenged her family made her feel a calm that she never felt before. Ning stayed with Emma by the sand looking at the horizon. She stared at it too, enjoying a world where she didn't constantly know everything that was happening and had to force herself to not listen to every single conversation that was happening between the billions of humans in the world. What's going on with finding the other planet? Emma asked. One where I can have friends. Well, Ning thought for a bit. To have a planet where you can make friends, one that will live as long as you, it will have to be a chi planet. I have asked the system to keep track of a few of them, but right now I don't even have any energy to collect one if I could find it. I will need to find more. Okay, Emma said. So what have you been doing all this time? Ning grinned. You want to hear your father's journey, do you? He asked happily. Before Emma would tell him to stop, he started talking about what it was he did in the time that he was missing. Emma heard it all and nodded. So let me get this straight. You got recruited by a shady guy in a tavern to deliver something for him, which could have been drugged, and 7 months later, you went on to kill the emperor of another empire? She asked. When you put it like that, I guess that did happen, Ning said. And the sword? Emma asked. Where is it? Ning brought out the sword from his storage space and showed it off to his daughter. Can you hold it? He asked her. Let me try, Emma said and grabbed the sword. She moved it around, slightly confused. It's light. You said it was heavy to anyone that wasn't bonded. Ning thought for a bit. It isn't treating you as a human then. It's treating you as a will, so it doesn't count you. That or it's afraid of you. The system acknowledged that was the truth. What is its story then? Emma asked. I don't know, Ning said. Let's find out together. He asked the system what the truth was, and he got an answer. I see, Ning said with his newfound knowledge. What is it? Emma asked curiously. Long ago, A will formed in this world, Ning started explaining. It was during a period of time when the humans were nothing but some primitive beings who didn't even live in a society. They prayed to their gods back then, the beasts that ruled the world. The divine beasts. So, as a result, the will that formed was also a beast. It lived for thousands of years until the humans grew so much that they no longer cared much for the beasts. Due to having been created from the souls of those that were born here, the change of their mindset caused a dissonance in the will, which caused it to lose its identity. Without an identity, a will can't live for very long, so it knew it was going to die. Even then, however, they will love every being equally. So, in its absence, it worried the people of Astoria would devolve into mindless wars, killing all the beast and men that were there. So, in an act of what could be called desperation, the will did something extreme. It went to the smallest continent of all, the Stonehall continent, and decided to convert it. There weren't many people living in the continent as it was a land belonging only to the beasts for the most part, so migrating them was no difficult task. Once no one was there, the will did what it could to convert half the continent and created a sword out of the essence in itself. That day, the world of Astoria lost one of its 4 continents. That was just 500 years ago. Emma's face was wide with shock upon hearing the story. The will, did it die? She asked with a worried look. I'm afraid it did, Ning said. It was already dying in the first place. Converting so much essence of the world into a physical object removed the planet from the level of threshold that was required for a will to exist. As a result, it disappeared after it made the sword. Emma was a little worried after hearing that. Will that happen to me too? She asked. Unlikely, Ning said. Earth is a world that only belongs to humans. Due to the lack of beasts, there isn't much that souls can imagine about other humans. As long as the humans thrive on Earth, you'll be fine. Even if that somehow does happen, you are a human before you are a will. If you somehow lose the willpower, you'll still live as a human, Ning said. Besides, with your father here, do you think you have anything to worry about? No, Emma said, smiling. Okay, continue that story. What happened to the sword then? How did it arrive on this island? That's where the fun begins, Ning said. You see, as I've mentioned, essence souls are like nascent souls for a chi cultivator. Even when a person dies, the nascent soul can live. However, unlike nascent souls, essence souls are much stronger if compared to their body when it was alive. Also, way less intelligent. That is, unless you are at the peak of essence realms, which the will was, Ning said. As a result, when the will died, its essence formed from its corpse, becoming another will that was all the same powerful. Then, it went on to finish what it had started, Ning said. It went to bring peace to the world that would last for centuries until the next will hopefully formed once again. The essence soul of the will went to every country and every empire in every continent, and used its new sword to show a dominating power that was so extreme that people would fear it for ages to come, Ning explained. It told them what the sword was made up of. A continent destroyed in its creation. No one would be worthy of it, and it would forever be a threat to the many empires and countries that tried to take it from him. It also told them that it would return if they ever did something destructive to the world and the innocent ones that lived in it. If it ever returned, it would kill them all, Ning said. As it was no longer a will, it could do that too if it wanted to. Did it return? Emma asked curiously. Did it go back to the countries that went on war? No, Ning said, sighing. It was a bluff. Even if it was the will's essence soul, it could not live for a very long time. Essence soul die very soon on their own, turning back to the essence that it was made out of. As a result, there was no way for that essence soul to ever go and attack the others, Ning said. All it could do was come back to meet one of its oldest friends, talk with him for a while, leave the sword for him to look after, and die on his back. The island we're on is where the essence soul died, Ning said, and that was the end of the will of the world that formed many thousand years ago. Whoa! Emma looked in surprise. It truly is a fantastical place. I couldn't have imagined such a world was possible. I look forward to learning more. Can I use essence? If you stay here for long enough, your body adapts to it by creating a core for you, but as it is now, no, Ning said. But that should take a dozen or so years. Emma got a bit sad hearing that. Is there no way for me to absorb essence? I'm afraid not, Ning said. You can do what I did though. Restrain your powers and only use what a normal essence user can use. Use for what? Emma asked. You know I can't hurt people. Then, Ning realized. I know the perfect way. We'll have to go to the origin where the time flows differently. Oh, that's not a bad idea, Emma said. She turned around and looked at the trees. We should gather these fruits as well. Can't let them go. Yes, Ning said. I plan on taking them all this time around. What even are these fruits anyway? They seem so special, Emma asked. Ning asked the system the same question and got an answer back within a second. He smiled at the answer. That's because it is not a normal fruit. The fruits that grow on the turtle's back are normal coconuts that have mutated over the past centuries from absorbing the most purest essence there is in this land. The essence that comes out of the dead essence soul of the dead wool of Astoria. It grows, falls down to the ground. Some get washed ashore, but most return to the sand, enriching it, growing more fruits of pure essence, Ning said. Most of the essence that formed the essence soul of the strongest being on the world lies in these very fruits. Which is why they are so special. Oh, Emma said excitedly. Let's gather them. She got up and tried to fly up but couldn't. She realized that her chi wasn't working at all. She tried magic, but that didn't work either. I truly can't use anything, huh? She asked. Then, she tried using the pure energy that came with being a will of a planet. She used her own energy and took flight. She could do whatever a will could do. She could create stuff out of nowhere, empower others, and many more things. Sometimes, Ning even wondered if the energy system was in part modeled after the celestial wills. Of course, the system would never answer that question, so he could only guess. The father and daughter duo went around the island, gathering every piece of fruit they could find. It was the most concentrated form of essence, so they took every piece of it. It took them a while to take it all down, and by the time they were done, it was approaching evening. Clara woke up from her nap and found them laying on their hammock too. Are you guys sleeping? She asked. No, just resting, Ning said. Oh, when are we going back? She asked. In a few hours, Ning said. There are a few places we will have to visit before we return, so it will take some time. Oh, can we not go back right now? She asked. Is it urgent? Ning asked. What do you have to do back there? Nothing, she said. She truly had nothing to do. You don't want your house back, do you? Or do you want to become the Lord of White Owl Region? He asked. Clara realized that she did not know what to do. On one hand, she did not want to return to that place, but on the other hand, she also wanted to maintain her father's legacy. I'll have to think about it, Clara said. Do that. Take your time, Ning said. There is no hurry. Clara left back to her hammock to think for a while, and soon enough the evening turning into night with stars glittering in the bright, open sky. Whoa, Emma said. That's so weird looking. It's like there are millions of explosions in the sky happening all at once. Ning smiled. Inside his inner world, there was only Earth, Sun and a moon. In their absence, the world was filled with darkness. As such, for the first time since she was born, Emma got to witness the starry sky in the night, and hearing her talking about it made Ning feel the happiest he had in a long time. After an hour or two of laying in the hammock, and thinking about what she wanted to do in the future, Clara decided to go and take her place as the rightful ruler of the White Owl region. That was her father's legacy, and she did not want to throw that away. There was a chance that she could come to regret this decision, but she decided to take it anyway. She would rather regret taking it now than regret not taking it later. So, she told Ning what she wanted to do. I want to go back, she said with a ferocious attitude. Great, Ning said. We should leave then. But, before we go, I think you might want to see something. Or rather, sense something. Clara looked at him weirdly. Sense what? Have you noticed that ever since you came here, you couldn't sense any essence at all? He asked. Clara looked around, trying to sense what she could. Wait, you're right. I can't sense anything. That's because I stopped your senses from working, Ning said. I thought you needed to work on your emotions and didn't want to give you any outside influence more than I already had. Papa, what are you talking about? Emma asked. You won't be able to tell. You don't have essence sense yet, Ning explained. But she will be able to tell very soon. You stopped by senses? Give it back, Clara said, please. Ning smiled. I will, he said, but try not to get scared. Scared? Of what? Clara asked. Ning continued smiling and snapped his finger to note the moment of change. Clara suddenly felt pure essence and water essence all around her. The pure essence was thick and strong, and the water essence, scary. Her legs shivered at the overwhelming senses she had as she tried to understand what was happening. She looked around at the sea, at the forest, and yet she could not tell where this strong essence was coming from. What's going on? She asked. Where is this coming from? Her voice had a level of stutter to it that Emma immediately picked up on. Is it scary? She asked. Of course it is scary, Clara said, looking around frantically, hoping to find something that could answer what was happening. Please, tell me, I'm scared. Ning looked at her directly and said, I think you have guessed already. Clara's eyes widened in fear as she came to understand just what was going on. She looked around, worried as she slowly said the next few words. Is there a divine beast nearby? She asked, her voice almost a whisper at this point. Oh, Emma noted and looked at her father. She doesn't know? Ning shook his head and looked at Clara. There is indeed a divine beast nearby, but that is not very accurate. What is accurate is that there is a divine beast right under our feet. What? Clara was simply too shocked to even have any inflections in her voice at the moment. Ning turned around. Can you show yourself, please? This girl wants to see you, he said. The ground shuddered at Ning's words as it elevated a bit above the sea. Clara grabbed hold of Ning to remain standing, and Emma simply chuckled looking around at the ocean that was so much further now. Then, from their left, they all saw something that raised its head high in the air, a turtle that Ning had only seen once before. Clara looked up to see the turtle and finally realized just how massive the thing was. She had not expected the divine beast to be so massive. She stumbled backward out of fear as the essence of a divine beast was too overwhelming for her, even though she was already in the stellar harmony realm. Ning snapped once again, and Clara lost all sense of essence once again. She still felt the fear in her heart, but the feeling of oppression had gone and what replaced was an emotional numbness that she couldn't explain at all. Ning looked toward the turtle and flew up toward its head. He landed on top of the head and spoke, Nice to finally meet you. Do you have a name? I am Gorifus. The turtle spoke in a beast language that only Ning and Emma understood. You are strong, aren't you? Very, Ning said. I am stronger than your old friend if you care about knowing that sort of information. Senior was strong back then, the turtle said. I am stronger, Ning said. But of course, I'm not really looking for opponents to compare myself with. I just wanted to thank you. Even if you didn't mean to be involved, I acquired quite a bit of help from you early on when I came here. Is that so? The turtle said. I had no hand in anything I did, so I don't really need your thinking, but I will accept it. Do you want anything in return? Ning asked. I don't think there is anything I want, the beast said. I am an old beast, looking to die of old age in the future. What need do I have for wishes? Are you sure? I can do something if you want me to, Ning said. I have no need for anything, the turtle said. Not even friends? Ning asked. I have had friends, and they have all died. I no longer want one anymore. I do not want anyone else to die, the turtle said. What if this one was a friend that couldn't die? Ning asked. A friend that can't die? The turtle didn't believe Ning. How could such a thing exist? Do you want one? Ning asked. I can get you one in a short time. About a century or so. The turtle looked up at Ning with doubt clear in its large blue eyes. How will you? You don't need to know how. You just need to say yes, and I will do it, Ning said. Do you want a friend? The turtle hesitated no longer. If you truly think I can have a friend that will live for a few millennia like me, then yes, I do want one. Can we leave now? Clara asked once Ning and Emma returned to the ground. Even without her sense, she still felt scared being on an island that was in fact a shell of a divine beast. Ning nodded. Let us leave then, he said, grabbing Emma's and Clara's hands before they disappeared. When they reappeared, Clara looked around with confusion clear on her face. Where are we? She asked. The landscape was one of a slanted forest as if it was on the side of a mountain. The land was wet from a recent rainstorm and the sky was mostly dark with thick clouds as well. The smell of rain still hung in the air, along with some other smell that Clara couldn't tell what it was. She looked through the forest and saw nothing but trees far past the forest as well. There was not a place in the entire continent that had a place like this. Are we back home? She asked. No, Ning said. Huh? Clara turned around to look at him. What do you mean no? No, Ning said. As in, we're not at your home, or anywhere near it. Clara's eyes narrowed in confusion again. She had asked Ning to take her home, even if she didn't word it that way, but he didn't take her back at all. Ning didn't seem to have any such plan at all. He did accept to leave, and yet, he brought her somewhere entirely different from where they were supposed to be. This is a mountain in a special region of the Springwind continent known as the Beast's Land. Hundreds of kilometers on all sides are full of essence beasts, each of which is strong enough to be in the essence manifestation realm, if not in the essence soul realm. There are even 60 beasts with their own separate area in this place, all of which are in the stellar harmony realm. As for the divine realm, there are 3 beasts of that rank in here, but they aren't close, Ning explained. I'm going to let your essence sense come back. Don't be afraid. Clara nodded and Ning let her sense work again. She cringed a bit, feeling the various essence all around her. The sky thundered, lighting the area in a bright light before leaving it in darkness again. Is this a rainforest, Papa? Emma asked. Not having divine sense is annoying. Haha, you'll get used to it, Ning said and looked at Clara. Now that your senses are working, I'm sure you can sense it, right? Sense what? Clara asked with a confused look on her face. Was she supposed to sense something? Maybe it doesn't leak as much and is hard for you to sense easily, Ning said. Try it, you should be able to. He walked past her, going up the slope while Emma followed behind her father, curious about the whole ordeal. Wait, what am I supposed to sense? Clara asked and quickly ran behind the two so as to not get left behind. As she ran up to them, she realized that she did sense something. It was vague at first, but when she moved up the mountain, it became stronger. The air was filled with all sorts of essences, and this one increased in concentration as she went up. She arrived next to Emma and Ning, who stood in front of an open cave. Arriving at the open cave herself, she could finally sense it so clearly that there was no doubt to her as to what was there. Shadow essence. She spoke in surprise. She hadn't expected to find shadow essence here at all. Essence crystals by themselves were rare around the continent, and ones with elemental attributes were even rare. On top of that, something like shadow was simply too rare to even be found in most locations. She tried to walk in but Ning blocked her with her arm. Your shadow essence allows you to hide yourself quite well, doesn't it? Ning asked freely. Huh? Oh yes, Clara said. It's a technique my father bought from the Springwind continent. Emma chuckled a bit hearing about that. He isn't talking to you, she said. A black puma walked out of the cave with the only parts of its body that had any sort of color being its purple eyes. It stared at the 3 of them, of which it could sense one person as strong as it was. As for the other 2, they weren't strong at all. It could easily be. Are you thinking that you can defeat us? Emma asked, looking at the beast. She walked up toward the puma which got ready to attack her. It growled, sending tendrils of shadows to attack her. However, when the attack did come for Emma, she simply flicked her finger, destroying all the tendrils at once. The force of her flick even caused a thunderous boom that shook the entire mountain. Oh, oops, she quickly hid her mouth in embarrassment. I didn't meant for it to be that strong, sorry. Clara's eyes were way too wide at this point. How? She whispered. She even wondered if all beings that came from the stars were that strong. Was it just her world that was weak para PS? The puma shuddered and tried to run away, but it found that it couldn't move. Emma arrived right next to it and grinned, petting the beast a little. What's your name? She asked the fearing beast. The puma looked at her, surprised that it could understand her at all. I am a shadow puma, it answered in its own language. I have no name. Wah. A female beast. Emma looked happy when she heard its voice. Papa, do you think I can keep her? If she agrees, sure, Ning said. Emma excitedly looked around at the puma and grinned. Do you want to come with me? She asked. If you do, I'll give you a name and I will take you around the world to see the many places you might not have seen before. The shadow puma was simply too scared to refuse immediately. The request itself was bizarre and outrageous, but the people that made it so were even more so. Not only were they completely without any essence, they were also simply too powerful to refuse and most likely continue living. The shadow puma started speaking, but it couldn't say anything. It wanted to refuse, but then it worried what that would mean, not just to her but also. Her fear made her feel completely unable to move. She stood there, not knowing what to do at all. "Come," Ning said, calling to Clara, who finally got out of her stupor. She looked at Emma with fear in her eyes and then back at Ning, who acted like nothing happened at all. "Your daughter," she spoke, following Ning quickly. "How is she so strong?" "Reasons," Ning said. "I could try and explain, but that would be like explaining the concept of smartphones to a group of primitive folks." What? Clara was confused. "See, it's hard to explain," Ning said. "Let's just say that she is simply too strong for anyone in this world." "Is everyone from your world like that?" Clara couldn't ask as they delved deeper into the cave and light started slowly dying. A person at the stellar harmony realm like her was supposed to have a vision that could even see clearly in the dark with nothing much light from the stars and the moons. However, in this instance, even when light came in through the cave's opening, the winding paths made it impossible to get all the way in. On top of that, it seemed to be naturally blocked off as well, causing the rest of the cave to forever remain in darkness. Shadow essence, Clara thought. "Not everyone," Ning answered her question. "Only my family and friends. Rest are strong, but not at the same level as us." "I see," Clara said. She imagined how strong the rest of them would be. "Don't mistake it though," Ning said. "Even amongst us all, I am at a realm beyond any of them are capable of reaching. Most of them can't even come close to my daughter in terms of strength, and I'm far beyond her." "Sounds like all the same to me," Clara said and continued walking down the cave. She followed the essence, now that she could sense it so much more clearly, and ended up at the end of the tunnel where the essence was at its highest. Light appeared out of nowhere around her and she looked toward Ning, who simply smiled at her, letting her know that it was his doing. She turned around and finally went to the edge of the cave where the darkness was the thickest. She paused when she saw something in front of her that she hadn't expected to see there. "Those are her children," Ning said, looking at the small puma cubs that were barely a few months old. He heard a swift rush as the puma ran back through the cave, coming back for her children. It seemed the threat of what would happen to her children had overshadowed the threat she felt for her own life. She stood before Ning and Clara, growing at them with a stance that was ready to attack them. Ning smiled and walked up to the puma. The puma jumped, slamming Ning with her paws, but nothing happened. Instead, Ning simply rubbed her head lightly when she landed and spoke up. "I'm not going to hurt your children. Don't worry," he said. "We're here for the shadow essence crystals that are hiding beneath this mountain." The puma didn't believe him, but there was nothing she could do. All she could do was try to fight him even more. Emma walked in. "What happened?" She paused when she saw the puma's children. "Wah!" She shrieked in surprise when she saw the cubs. There were two of them, and both of whom were sleeping. They stirred awake hearing noise in the room. They made some cute noise that got Emma even more excited than she already was. She walked up and went past the puma, who couldn't move at all anymore. The puma growled, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't even see what was happening behind her. Emma took the two cubs on her embrace and brought them to their mother. "Look, I'm not going to hurt your children," she said, caressing the two cubs. She let them go after a few seconds next to the puma, who could finally move. Emma walked back up to her father. Ning looked surprised. "What's wrong? Do you not want her anymore?" he asked. "She is more scared of me than anything," Emma said. "I don't want to take her when she would probably hate me more than anything if I did so. I'll find something else, I guess." Even as she said so, her eyes were still on the pupa and the two cubs. Ning sighed and looked at the beast. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave here now," he said. "We're going to take away all the shadow essence from here, so there won't be anything left for you at all." The puma looked at them in confusion and a bit of curiosity. She slowly grabbed the cubs with her mouth and walked out with them. Once she was completely out, Ning finally got to work. He tore apart the ground with his energy, sending earthquakes around the location and made many weaker animals flee away. Ning pushed the walls back, making everything bigger, and then grabbed onto the crystal with his telekinesis powers. He used the full brunt of his force and pulled out the black crystals as far as he could. Clara saw the crystals and showed a look of shock. The shadow essence crystals she saw today were purer than anything her family could have ever mined. With such great crystals, anyone could reach the pinnacles of essences without any worries.